I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. First on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next order of business is the roll call.
Alder Allen does not appear to be here yet. Alder Arata Frada. Here. Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst.
Here.
Alder Maldonado.
Here.
Mayor Richardson.
I am here.
Alder Strassman. Alder Udell.
Present.
Alder Wheeler.
Here.
Is this where I announce
Looks like
you have
Alder
a
Allen
quorum?
just hopped on as well.
What was that, Joe?
Alder Allen is on Zoom.
Okay, great, thank you. You got a quorum?
Very good. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 4, approval of minutes for September 22nd, 2021, draft minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval just so that everyone knows I'm here.
Very good. Do I, motion made by,
Second.
okay, very good. Thank you. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Item 5, public appearance for non-agenda items. We do not have anybody in chambers nor Zoom. Moving on to item 6, agenda items, 2022 proposed budget amendment process introduction. Misty Dodge, Finance Director. Misty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So first I want to show the public in particular where the agenda, or where the packet is that outlines all of the different council proposed amendments as well as the omnibus amendments. So the easiest way to do it is go to the government header on the website and then under finance. Over on the left, financial reports or records and reports, and all the budget stuff is right here at the top. So the council amendments is the first link that's there. And then if you look at the document, recommend using those bookmarks again, just like we did for the regular budget document. You'll see all of the amendments are outlined here, and then anytime there was a staff memo, I created a bookmark for that as well, so you can see when those are applicable. And then as you're looking at the form, the top left corner here will tell you how it affects the property tax levy, whether it's an increase, a decrease, or no effect. Other places to look, so the top right corner will have the amendment number, the title, the council that sponsored it, and then if it's related to a new staffing proposal, that number will be here as well. And then I did include as a supporting document that new staffing proposal request as some additional background. And then when you're looking at the form, the first box is really the what, so what council member is recommending for change. The second box would be why they are recommending that change. Then there's a spot for finance director notes, and then the accounting that would be applicable to that particular amendment. So tonight the purpose is to have the discussion. So hopefully this will be a very interesting conversation where everybody can share what their perspective is on the proposal, ask questions. The departments that are affected by the amendment should be present and able to answer any other questions that you have or provide additional background. And then there is no voting tonight. That will all happen at the council meeting, but this is just the discussion piece. And then after we go through this tonight, there's also the resolution on this meeting where we'll talk about that kind of extra step in the process that we have available to us. So we'll have that conversation as well. That is all I have.
Very good. Item 6B, is that 2022 proposed budget amendments? Now, this is discussion only?
Correct.
Okay, discussion only, no action will be taken, and these are the documents that you just walked through? Correct, okay, thank you. So, the first order of business then is amendment number 1, delay hiring of Assistant Director of Public Works. And the sponsor of amendment 1 is Alder Arata Frada. You have the floor.
Thank you. So before I discuss my first 2022 budget amendment to the 2022 mayor's budget, I would like to share the rationale and priority for my amendments, since most of the amendment introduced to the budget tonight came from Alde Gerhard and myself. I need to explain the logic behind my amendment because I have several, okay? So they are all interconnected. So as you all know, the budget rule, if you want to add something to the budget that implies a levy increase or a stormwater increase, you need to remove, delay, change funding sources to cover what the new amendment cost. This is the rule that I apply to all my amendments that I am bringing forward, and some will impact the tax levy. My priority for this 2022 budget are to provide staffing support to the fire department. We will see some of the facts, like a growing community, plus the town of Madison annexation, plus some retirement at the end of the year. Some of them are happening in the pay-on-call staffing, that some of them work full-time. To increase the urban forester naturalist hours, and to increase and annually adjust the pay-on-call promise, pay-on-call firefighter, and starting wages to be equal to and consistent with the rest of the city staff. Another priority is to add an essential amenity to the inclusive playground park, a water fountain, and I wish this project has been in the pipeline since 2018, and I wish this project to be completed next year. To accomplish my budget amendment, I have to find the funds to cover for these additions. Furthermore, one of the amendments, reclassifying 3 full-time firefighters to lieutenants, is the third time that I am bringing this amendment forward. With the town of Madison annexation, it's crucial to have a fire department with an organizational structure that will accommodate the additional city growth and needs. To be able to add another career fighter, I had to apply a strategy to reduce, adjust the levy limit for a future earmark capital item in 2023. This item is the police body camera that will be purchased in 23. Next year, the city is planning to close tax incremental district number 6, and there will be a windfall of extra funds to come back to the tax roll. Therefore, this capital purchase could be funded by the one-time TID closure that the funding is expected in 2022 and 2023. So I want to be clear with all of you. I always support the body camera, and I will. I am not trying to delay or remove anything with this strategy, only to move funds around. Thank you for the consideration, and I hope that you will support my amendment or some of them. So this is my intro, because so you can understand my logic, what I'm trying to do here. So my first amendment is to delay the hiring of an assistant director of public work. This amendment is to delay the position. This is a new position from to 2023 of future years. And the rationale for my amendment is that the tax levy, the component from this, how we're going to pay for this new assistant director is some money is going to be paid with tax levy, and the rest with other fund, like a stormwater fund, utility. So the tax levy funding, say, with delay in this position, should be used to cover the reclassification of the 3 firefighters to lieutenant, and the additional 8 hours per week to the city forester. That this one is another amendment that are coming later. So the mayor proposed budget includes 3 new positions. The first one is the GIS coordinator. It's a full-time that will collaborate with different departments and will reduce or remove extra workload from department staff. The second is the stormwater project engineer. This is a half of full-time, part-time, that will assist with the growing number of stormwater projects. Third, We are also hiring a new clerical float position, it's a full-time, that will provide multiple departments, including public works, with clerical assistant. The city needs to wait for how those positions will assist the public work director with his workload. Also, in reading the job description for this position, it seems that this staff will be doing similar work as a director of public work. I think we need to be provided with a better explanation of the need for this position. The other thing that I want to add that is not here, but I want to mention is, I didn't see any metric in the justification of the position about, we know that the city has grown in the last 10 years. We know that there are multiple new development projects, but I would like to see in the future for any new staff requisition, kind of like a metric section saying, okay, this is how many more hours workload or more hours is the public work director working right now. You know, he's over capacity and for how many. If there are other people in the public department that they are working at capacity and this is what we need this position, I would like to see those numbers. So far we were providing with, what are the job description, but it's missing we know that the city is growing, but we would like to see those numbers, put it in a piece of paper and say, what are the metrics for this? This is a new position. And there are other positions that have been in the pipeline for many years, so this is my priority are not going to be. That's it.
Very good. Moving on to amendment number 2, reduce.
Actually, Randy, you should ask first if there's any other discussion
Okay,
that
thank
the other
you.
members want to
Is
have.
there further discussion? Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry. Alder Wheeler.
Bill, this question is for you. So what work will not get done if you do not get this position?
I good? Okay. It's difficult to say. We do have a lot of development that's going on. Currently, I'm not really overseeing our supervisors. Our operations department is operating on their own. We've got a great staff. And I really would like to concentrate more on the long-term range planning of our operations. That's one thing that's suffered over the past few years that due to the development and everything that's been occurring in Fitchburg, that it has taken a lot of my time to coordinate the development of everything coming into Fitchburg. So it's something that we really need to concentrate on. I really feel like I am doing 2 jobs as being a city engineer and a director of public works. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why there's been turnover in staffing at this position over the years. It is a lot of work to coordinate all of the development and keep on top of it. It funnels into one person and goes out. And it's a lot to prioritize. So not saying that we're not going to keep doing it, but we've been doing it for 4 to 5 years now. Myself and our staff, engineering staff that are salaried, we have put in more than 40, 50 hours a week continuously, thousands of hours a year for the past 4 to 5 years. We're taking on more than we can do. We're trying our best, but it really, in a capacity with the growing city, with the increased regulations that we have, environmental, flooding, everything that's happening, we're trying to prioritize what we're doing. And basically what we're doing is trying to prioritize who we're not going to disappoint, which is pretty overwhelming on a daily basis when you want to try to help everybody. But somebody's got to be disappointed, and it just seems to be growing. So what this position was to do essentially is to split off the city engineering, or at least share that responsibility, so that we can split up the amount of development, the amount of engineering projects that are being overseen by the department. It's not going to stop growing. We've got a lot of projects coming up. We've got a lot of development that's coming in. And I'm not doing this for myself right now, but we're at a point now where we have to start looking at the next 20,000 population growth and how we're going to deal with that. And we got to dedicate the time to look at that and plan for that. So that's why we're primarily looking at this position. But to say what's not going to get done, we're going to try to get it done. We always will, but it's wearing.
Okay, so my expectation of a department head is to do that strategic planning and to, look at 5 years in front of us and how we are going to move the city forward. So when I'm gathering what you're saying is that because you have to do the work, you're not able to do that, those functions of a division head. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Yes, Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Yeah, Bill, I've got a couple of questions while you're talking. One is the Rimrock Road neighborhood. Where is the water for that currently coming from? Is that still attached to Madison, or is it coming from Fitchburg now?
The water and the sewer is coming from the city of Madison, and they will continue to maintain those facilities when the annexation occurs.
Okay, because the Southdale neighborhood is also getting their water from the city of Madison, correct?
Alder Allen, any additional questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, there must have been a little glitch in the system here. The Southdale neighborhood is getting its water from the city of Madison.
Correct. We have an agreement with the city of Madison, a purchase agreement with them.
All right. Have we done any kind of inventory of the streets and roads and stormwater facilities in the Southdale neighborhood as of yet?
Yes, we've been working with the Department of Public Works from the town of Madison in those areas. We have the inventory for the streets. We've conducted those, so we know what streets need to be repaired within the next 5 years, and the maintenance records, et cetera. Stormwater, we're still gathering data on that, and we're making assessments based upon the data that we're receiving from the town.
All right, and do we currently have a stormwater engineer on staff, I believe, is that correct?
Yes.
And that position is most likely funded through the stormwater utility, right?
Correct. It's 50% stormwater utility and 50% refuse and recycling.
Okay. And that's a full-time position?
Correct.
So with the town of Madison coming in with the Southdale neighborhood, just with what you know so far, how much do you think that's going to add to your workload as you try to coordinate? I know that the streets up there have some issues, so we're going to have to do some work up there to try to get those things brought up to our standards. There's probably going to have to be some work in the stormwater area that you're going to have to oversee. How much do you think that's going to increase your workload just based on what you know so far?
We would be looking to increase our road inventory by about 3%. It's not going to be significant in comparison to what we are currently managing, but we are looking at an increase in maintenance operations that we need to concentrate our time on. So we need to do more planning in that area. As far as new development and reviews, the town is pretty much built out in that area. There's just the small industrial business park that's left up there that would have a few developments. So I'm not too concerned about new developments. It's more the operations and maintenance part of things that we need to provide the supervision on.
All right, that's all I had.
Very good. Alder Herbst, you have a question or two?
More a comment, some perspective on this. I've worked with all city engineers that we've had in our history, and we start out, we had a city engineer, and it's been many, many years ago that we were set up. We had our city engineer, we had a water engineer, Tracy, who's been with us many years, transportation engineer, and then we added a environmental engineer. And that was probably 15 years ago, or maybe 20, and that's kind of same level we're at here, but the city has probably doubled in size since then. And in my position in the private industry, I have one similar to Bill, where if I end up, it's too busy and I have to do too much engineering, the functions, the supervision, other things in the department, fall by the wayside. So what he's telling you, I experience firsthand. The second thing is, if you look, go and read our minutes. I've been on the board 28 years. First started, there'd be one or two things in the engineer's report. The past 2 years, it's probably been 6 to 8 every time Bill is giving his report. Substantially more. That workload is very high, and you won't find anyone that hates growth in government more than me, but I also hate the stress that I see in our Director of Public Works' eyes, every time we have a meeting. So I think this is a necessary position, and the growth of the city, which we seems no end in sight. If we don't fund this, I fear we go backwards. Thank you.
Mayor Richardson, you have the floor.
Joe, you can go first. Joe had his hand raised right away. Go ahead, Joe.
Thanks, Aaron.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So just to sum up, Alder Radafrana, so number one, you mentioned that there's two, new positions, GIS and stormwater project engineer, that would relieve some of the work. Number two, there's other positions that have sort of been in the queue for longer that need to be filled and have needed to be filled for years. And number three, you want to see sort of justifications for this position, sort of pen to paper before funding it. Is that correct?
Yes, I would like, because the city's already is gonna hire 3 new positions that they are already, no one have removed or touched. The GIS, the floating clerical position, and also another stormwater engineer. My idea is, I am not saying that we need to remove the position. I say maybe we need to delay for another year and determine how these new other 3 positions can help Bill or some of the engineering public work with some capacity or workload. And I would like to see, you mentioned, Bill, in your presentation about how the city has grown, the hours, number, blah, blah, blah. I don't see it here, even in your memo. You know what I mean? I would like to be, because for me, I would like to see what are the metrics, because I want to tell you something. Every time that I need to put a staff requisition in my job for my group, I need to show the managing partner the numbers. What is the capacity of the team? Why do we need this person? What is person is going to do? How many hours? You know what I mean? So, and this is what I say, this is a new position. This is not like a vacant position. This is a new position brought to us this first year, and it will be, I don't know, I would like to see more, the fundamental of what do we, I agree with you, Dave. Everything that you say, I agree with that. And I know that the city is growing. The city has been growing for many, many years, okay? It's not like in the last 2 years. The city has been growing for the last 10 years. And my other concern is, I know in the 6 years that I have been in this seat, you are the 4th public works director that I interact. So something is happening that people are coming and going. But the previous public works director was in the position for many years. So, and the city was still growing. So I want to know how we can help you. And I think you are going to receive a lot of help here, or most of the department with all these, the GIS coordinator and the new clerical floater position. There are help coming, and also another stormwater engineer. So this is my reasoning. It's not like I agree with you, Dave, we need, but every department is growing, and every department needs more people. So The rationale that you're using for this position, for this department, we need to use it in parks, we need to use it in the fire department, we need to use it in the police department, we can use it everywhere. Because at the end of the day, we are a service organization and we provide service to our residents. That's all.
So my follow-up question to that is, whether to Bill or the mayor, what is usually the steps when a case needs to be made for a new position, and has sort of the needs that Alder Radafrada was putting out there? Do we have a standard process in place when we need a new position or we need more capacity in a department? What has been done so far in this, and what is the standard for the city in general?
Are you asking that question of Bill or the mayor?
I would say both. The question for the mayor is, more, do we have a standardized process for these type of things other than to just put it in the budget the year of? Or, do we have to Bill, to Alder Radafrada's point, has sort of that justification for the position, to what extent has that been done, or has that been done?
You want me to kind of take first crack at it? There's not a standard process, I guess. There's a lot of different ways that a new project or a new position comes forward. Some of it is planning, where we know things are happening. For instance, we've been doing that with at least some of the positions in the town of Madison, knowing that's coming. Some of it is other things come up that necessitate that. For example, if there's new requirements for GIS, for example, that's part of the reason why we have to add the GIS coordinators, because there's all these new requirements that we have to follow. And so that kind of came out, it started, I think last year, maybe the year before was the first year that it started, but we knew that there's requirements starting next year that we have to meet. And so that kind of helps drive that. So there's not necessarily a standard out there. I think it's partly planning. I think one of the things that Chad and I have already talked about is doing better planning citywide for all departments, whether it's like a 5-year plan or something like that, because we don't have a lot of that. That's something that I've talked to some departments about, fire department actually being one of those. And so I think that's something that Chad has identified already as something we want to do. But even at that, we plan as much as we can. We have a list of other positions that we want to fulfill. At least that's something that I've done, which is a new thing. But I do think that there is also no guarantee that will happen. You get new council members every year, and they might decide, something's not important here, or something's not important there. So I think that's where some department heads get stuck, is that priorities can change. And so if they had something, 4 years ago where a council said, oh yeah, we want to do this in a few years, the new council members can say, well, that's not actually where we want to have the priority right now. And so some people do get stuck up on that and hung up on that, because it's every year, it's the council at the time can say, yeah, that sounds great, or yeah, things have changed, or we think this is actually a bigger priority for whatever reason. And then, you want me to continue with my comments?
No, go ahead if you have additional comments, certainly.
Yeah, so I think, spoiler alert, I'm not going to be a huge fan of most of the amendments, because I did the budget the way I thought was best. So that's probably not going to be much of a surprise. But I will say that for this, I think it is critically important. I've heard from a number of staff, and I think Chad can speak to this a little bit too, that out of all the amendments, it seems like this is the one that other staff, and not public works staff even, is all departments have come forward and said, I don't agree with this. I see the demands and the needs of this department, and it needs to happen. This is something that is very concerning if this gets taken out. It really seems like my priority was supporting public works and providing them the resources that they need, because they have been understaffed for a long time. And it seems like Julia's is fire department, and that's an option. It's not something where I think is the priority. I think it is public works, which is why I put these positions in there. And a big part of it too is succession planning. People have talked about how many public works directors we had, and they left for various reasons. Part of it is workload. And without having other management and, like this position there, we've struggled with some of that transition. And so this helps bring some continuity, and also possibly as we have succession planning, maybe this position, I hope Bill doesn't leave, stay forever, Bill. But if he, wins the lottery and he leaves, hopefully this person is qualified enough to take that role, but at least is qualified enough to keep things going smoothly. And so I think that's a big piece of it as well. We talk about Lacey Roads coming up, Cyene Road, Fitchburg in a few years, all the stormwater projects throughout the city. Even if we delay some of them, they still need to happen in the next few years because there's issues throughout the city. All the neighborhood development, the demand's not slowing down, it's still going. And when you talk about metrics, I think you can easily see the growth in the city and the demand that's had. I'd say most of the people on the council have at some point complained about the response from Public Works or projects not getting done as soon as they want. That's because of capacity, and that's where this position is going to be a huge benefit for that. And so I think that's a huge key to me. And let's see, I think I got everything I wanted to hit on, but I guess that's just why I think this is a critically important position to a department that has been understaffed, like Dave has said, for quite a while, and there's a lot happening, so.
Yeah. Alder Allen, you have the floor next. Now, go ahead.
Thank you. So I agree with the mayor on one thing at least, and that is that there really isn't a standardized process that the city's ever had for determining when we need a new position. And that's primarily because every department runs a little bit differently. There's not standardized departments. The police department doesn't run the same way that the fire department does. Public Works doesn't run the same way that the senior center does. So, I mean, everything's a little bit different. And so a large part of it does come down to just being a judgment call. In the case of Public Works, in addition to the growth of the city and the annexation coming up, there's also other intangible things that have changed. So we just finished our CIP process. And in the CIP, how many stormwater projects did we have? There's at least a half a dozen in there. And most of those stormwater projects are to fix stormwater problems that were created 25 or 30 years ago when the standards for development were different. So even if you were to compare, even if you were to say to Bill, hey, Bill, Fitchburg's going to build 150 new units this year, 200 new units this year, the standards for building those 200 new units are more intense than the standards for building those same 200 units were 20 or 25 years ago. So one of the things that has happened is not just that the workload has increased, but the amount of specialization among the members of our Public Works department has also changed and become more intense. And in that department, it's probably been bigger changes than what we've seen in any other department, just because regulations have changed, Fitchburg standards have changed, our expectations of what we want from new development are different, as well as, listening to our residents telling us that they don't like all the potholes. So I do think that, I think for a long time, even back when Paul Woodard was there, he and I used to talk about the challenges he had trying to coordinate all the things we were doing then. And that was when the city had, a third as many miles of roadway. So I do think there is a need for additional staffing in the Public Works Department, at least so that the planning can get done more appropriately and with people who have the correct expertise to be able to be able to come up with good estimates for what it's going to cost to build a project. For example, I know we had at least two projects since I got reelected that we just turned away because the cost came in way above whatever we were estimating originally. And that's not because it's just because things are different now. Everything's changing, and there just simply isn't enough time to get all this stuff done, to keep up on every level of workload. You just need more bodies. You need more people with more diverse knowledge.
Alder Wheeler, you have the floor. No? You pass? Okay. Additional discussion before moving on. Okay, Alder
My last
Rada
comment is, I agree with everything that you say, guys. I am not removing the position, I am delaying, so, okay?
All right. Shall move on to amendment number 2, reduce fire fleet vehicle replacement fund CIP, which is, the sponsor is Alder Arada Frada. Would you like to address?
Yes, so
Go ahead.
in case that you don't approve the first one, I need to continue looking for money to, to support my amendments, okay? So another way I found is, because one of my priority amendment is to the reclassification of the 3 firefighters, so I need to look for $22,000. So, and I went to my logic was I'm gonna go to the firefighter CIP to see if I can find some money there, okay? So this is the logic behind. So this amendment is to review the fire fleet vehicle replacement project, that is a $22.99, in the amount of $22,000 for 2022, and increase it to its original amount in 2023 to cover for the reclassification of the 3 lieutenants. I know that this one is, Misty say create a structural deficit. I get it, I know it, but I really believe that I need to find this money the funds to approve that my other amendment for the reclassification of the firefighters. So I know that what I am doing here is not the best accounting thing, but I am in the pursuit of funding.
Okay, very good. Discussion. Alder Maldonado.
Alder Radafrada, I'm assuming you probably had this conversation with Chief Paul Brunacher. Can you share what his perspective on this amendment is?
Alder Udell, how are you?
I'm well.
Do I have the floor?
You have the floor.
So as far as the budget amendment goes, anytime we take away from funding that already existed, there is a structural deficit. There is the potential of us pushing back purchase of fleet vehicles by a year and doing that across the board, but it does impact our ability to purchase on schedule. So, and I don't know what that does long-term. I can tell you that it would impact what we're doing in the way of purchasing starting next year with fleet vehicles and having to address the life cycle of those fleet vehicles. So it does have impact, and Misty has already identified the structural deficit.
Additional questions or discussion? Mayor Richardson, you have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 things. One, it seems like every year something like this comes up, and I'll forever say we shouldn't be doing the structural deficits. It's just a bad idea, plan idea. It's one of the smartest things we do is how we do our capital. So I'll never support that. And 2, I think it's also very problematic to take money from capital and transition it to operating because they do different things. And this, again, kind of a strategy I don't think is good. I know Misty had a slide in one of the earlier presentations about how much of our money is going towards operating instead of capital, and our capital expenses are going down, relatively speaking, and that's a concern, that's an issue. And so I don't agree with moving capital to operating. I think we need to keep that there. Frankly, we need to probably spend more in capital. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up with that?
Sure.
So-
You have the floor.
what I am doing is reducing 1 year, but then we can, if we can find the funds to increase it, to, you know, to put the same level of capital improvement in the following year. So I think that the fire department has been very, you know, how can I say, they have been very frugal and looking for way to reduce some of the expenses. So this is what I am confident that even though this is the last option to do this, but in the case that we need to find the $22,000 and we don't find it in any other place, this is one of the last resort.
Thank you. Alder Allen, you now have the floor.
I'm going to ask Misty a couple of questions, so be ready. At one point, some time ago, we were budgeting, and I have to apologize, I did not have a chance to get through all 380 some odd pages of the budget. And I was going to look this particular item up, but I just ran out of time last week. At one point, we were budgeting a certain amount of money every year. And when I left office in 2011, I believe it was around $300,000 a year that was going into a capital equipment replacement fund. And the idea was that we would just have a certain amount of money that went into that fund every year. So when capital equipment needed to be replaced, it would come out of that fund. And it might be adjusted up and down a little bit, but one of the things that was driving the council nuts at the time was, you know, all of a sudden you'd have to fund a fire engine or an ambulance or something that, you know, is a big ticket item. And rather than have these big, huge ups and downs every year, we were trying to smooth it out. Do we still do that, or is that something that's not a thing anymore?
So I can't speak to whether or not it was a thing before. I believe if it was discontinued at some point, because these replacement funds with the equipment is something that we've kind of reestablished within the last 4 or 5 years. So exactly all the benefits you're talking about with the replacement fund is what we have going on now in the CIP, but it's split by department. So there's a fire one, a police one, et cetera, each one of those kind of categories of vehicles. And so that's
I see.
Exactly what this amendment is talking about.
Yeah, so this is to take money that would normally go into that capital replacement fund and use it for an operating expense.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next amendment, amendment number 3. Remove vehicle use reimbursement in certain departments. And Alder Gerhardt, you are the sponsor. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you. I hope this one is pretty straightforward, but ultimately I was looking for reductions in the budget to pay for the amendments I've suggested that increase the tax levy, and I identified vehicle use reimbursements in several departments that either have enough cars to cover all the staff, or it was a fund that had not been used for a significant amount of time pre-COVID even. So not used because of COVID, but not used even earlier than that. So it all adds up to about $1,025. Only 950 of that, 915 of that comes from the tax levy. The rest is from the refuse and recycling budget. And I think it's just a way to kind of clean up an accounting error and give a little bit more room in the budget.
Discussion. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Moving on to amendment number 4, remove South Stoner Prairie Neighborhood Planning. And Alder Gerhardt, you are the sponsor, and would you like to speak to this one as well, please?
I would, yes, thank you. So this is kind of my key amendment to pay for the things that are coming next. And I specifically proposed this to pay for 2 things that are coming next: the sustainability plan and the increasing the urban foresters' time to full-time. And if this is passed and those 2 amendments are passed, This amendment will pay for all of that and leave about 7,000, lowered the tax levy by about $7,000 on top of that. So, and the reasoning behind this is, well, so there's two things. I think that in terms of tax levy use, we're a service organization. We talk about this often. Staff is important. And I think there is an obvious lack of staff in the urban forest area. And the urban forester is very, very involved in development and moving and expanding our city. She's involved in a lot of steps in it. So I think before we can continue planning this new neighborhood that expands the urban service area and is very complex, I think we need to have our urban forester fully staffed, which would be the one person to full time. But then also, I think the sustainability plan is very connected to this because we'll talk about it in a bit, but I think that as we continue to expand the urban service area, I am not convinced that we have enough in place that prepares us for climate change to allow us to truly move forward with a plan like this in the most responsible way. And I'll give you one example of what I'm talking about. So for the South Stoner Prairie neighborhood plan identified the sub-zero kettle on Lacey and Seminole as an important part of the stormwater management plan for that area, because the kettle was assumed to be mostly dry and that it could handle all the water influx from major storm events. But as we've learned over the last couple of years, as we've done, the kettle is constantly full. And looks like in the future, we may actually need to pump it regularly in order to keep it low enough to handle stormwater capacity. That's the type of thing that was missing in the original planning. And I think issues like that are going to pop up more often as we move forward with expanding the urban service area, the complexity of adding all that infrastructure. And I think we should have a sustainability plan in place, or at least in the process of being worked on as this plan goes forward. And one additional note on top of that, this is a really good use of the TID number 6 closure funding that we're anticipating may happen next year. The best use of that funding would be one-time projects. So I would rather take this out of the budget now, free up $75,000 in tax levy so that we can pay for things like staffing needs and things that I think are more urgent. And then when the TID 6 closes next year, we can put this as part of those one-time expenses that we pay for and move forward from there. That's all for now.
Okay. Discussion. Alder Arada-Frada, you have the floor.
Yes, okay, so as a member of CEDA, we have been waiting for this South Stoner Prairie neighborhood planning for many, many years. I think we started talking about this in 2019. So, you know, I understand what you're trying to do, Gabriela, here, you know, and I think if we get the money to pay with the TID closure, I will be fine to support your agenda. I don't like the word remove, maybe to use another word, because we need to do this planning. We have only, I asked the city administrator to give me some number about how many single unit homes for the Verona School District are vacant right now, and there is only 111. And I know there is a new development coming that came last night to council, the Payne and Dolan, and that one is going to add another 123 new single home lot. And I know that part of the South Stoner Prairie is to start planning for, you know, to extend that neighborhood in the south part because eventually the city, we need to grow. And my concern right now is when a Terra Besa is built out, when Fahey Field is done, where we are going to grow, okay? And this is what is important for us to move forward with the South Stoner Prairie neighborhood planning. Is very critical for economic development. So I am, you know, if we are gonna, I understand, and I agree with you, we shouldn't put it in the tax levy we should find other funding to pay for this. And, you know, if we have some assurance that we can, this planning can be paid with the TID closure number 6, you know, I think it makes sense, you know. But I think I think it's important to, I don't want to see the word remove because we need to do this planning, you know what I mean? So,
May I respond?
Yes,
Okay,
you have the
thank
floor.
you. Yeah, I mean, maybe the word remove was incorrect, but I tried to make it clear in my justification that the intention is not to never do the plan, it's just to delay the plan, and possibly not delay it very long if we end up closing the TID 6 closure, do the TID 6 closure early next year. There potentially is funding mid-year to start the plan for this. But I do think that tax levy should be freed up at the very least to pay for that urban forester position, because I think that tax levy should go to positions, city staff that are doing service to the residents.
Mayor Richardson, you have the floor now.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with, Julia about the importance of doing this, which is why I think it's so critical to keep it in here. This is something that should have been started by now, frankly. And I'm also very concerned. Frankly, we should have probably the second neighborhood plan started right now too, which would probably be Greenfield. That's how far behind right now we are in the pipeline with not having, new lands in there and not having other new neighborhood plans in a number of years now. There's going to be a potential problem there. And we saw that, I think it was like 8 years ago. Mike Zimmerman has all the details. He's a good history person for that. My concern is delaying this. We will probably close the TID in April, but this puts at least a 6-month delay on this project when it should have been in the middle of it already. So I think it needs to happen now. Frankly, 2 of them should be started, but we just don't have the capacity or the money for that. And so I agree though 100% in making sure that we're taking into consideration the climate change impacts, because that is a huge concern in this area. And it's something that as we do this neighborhood planning, we have to take into consideration. We have to plan for that and assume that it's going to only get worse at this point. So I do agree with that part as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment on this. Back in the day, we used to get significant contributions from the landowners and developers to fund neighborhood plans so that the cost of the neighborhood plan was not 100% on the backs of the taxpayers. For instance, when we did the original Green Tech Village plan that became Uptown, and when we did the Nine Springs neighborhood plan, and I can give you a few others, those we used to expect the developers who now are trying to sell these houses for $350,000 and $400,000 to use a little bit of that money to help fund the neighborhood plans.
Can I respond real quick?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this plan, it's 150,000. Half of it is paid for by other means. I didn't make that clear in my introduction. So 75,000 is paid in by partners. 75,000 is paid in by the city, and that's why delaying this plan only reduces the tax levy by 75,000, even though it's $150,000 planning plan. So it is getting contributions, but when I talked to our finance director about just removing the tax levy portion until we could add it back in, she recommended actually removing the full amount, so it doesn't make it seem like we're only making external partners pay for a plan that we should be contributing to, which is why I changed the amendment to remove all the funding, including the external sources.
Not related to this. I no disrespect to all our esteemed alders and people. I would ask that we follow the same rules we ask when people come to speak, that we limit our, limit 3 minutes, and I would ask that we try to follow that same, in the sake of everyone, courteous to everyone.
I don't believe that that's in order, is it? No. Yeah.
I'm just asking as a common sense. All right.
Alder Maldonado, you have the floor.
Yeah. So, 2 questions. One, thinking about what conversation was just had, is it possible to spread this plan over the course of this year and next year if tax levy would cover sort of 1/2 of a neighborhood plan and the TID would cover another? And then the second question is, kind of based on all of the other things that, that were mentioned by the mayor as well as Alder Radafrada, what, in your estimation, would be the sort of cost or risk of delaying the plan a year? And what would be the best way to be able to mitigate that delay?
And that question is directed to?
Alder Gerhardt.
So for the first question, in terms of the doing only half, I feel like I have to defer to staff on that in terms of functionally how that would work. I'm certainly willing to possibly introduce an amendment of that nature. But Misty, do you have anything to add to that? Is that something that we could do, is just reduce it in half?
So if we believe that the plan would take those 2 years, in theory, we could, as long as it's half and half. The concern I have, of course, is we need to make sure we get the commitments from those other partners for the full amount, that everybody knows what the expectation is and what the future is. The other, I guess, downside of that approach would be we have to make sure council commits to that second year of funding. And it's not something that is taken out through the budget process. So best practice, of course, would be to fund it all and to have the contract signed using that funding when it's there.
Yeah, so to that point, the context I'm thinking is, right, if it's technically spread over 2 calendar years, it's still happening within the course of a year, right? Let's say you started a study in the plan in June or July of 2022, using those, those committed partner funds that are, already in the queue, and in 2023, using the TID closure funds to be able to continue that study into the end of June, right? So you'd have a year of doing the study. You would just be doing it in 2 different calendar years.
If I may, so whenever we do a big project like that, the comptroller has to sign off saying that the funding exists in order to pay for that contract. So if the funding doesn't exist, the city's portion is in 2023, we would have to break that contract up into 2 pieces, because we could only sign saying that we had the money for the money that we actually have. You also mentioned maybe we do the partner money first and then the city money later. My hesitation on that is the partners probably want to make sure that the city is committed to their piece also. And not that it's their money in first. I suspect they would have heartburn over that.
Yes, Alder Gerhardt, you have a response, question?
Oh, no, I mean, Joe had asked a second question for me to respond to, and I apologize, but can you repeat the question?
Yeah, based on some of Julia and Aaron's concerns, what challenges do you anticipate a delay would cause? And, what are your thoughts on sort of mitigating those challenges or those consequences of delaying?
I mean, I would hope that the delay is minimal, given the amount of money that we're expecting in the TID closure, and that we very early, or at least at the latest mid-year, would know that we'll be able to move forward with it because the funding is in place. But I guess I just will reiterate that position that with the sustainability plan, I do think that should be happening at least simultaneously, because I do think that there may be ordinance changes that are in order before we continue to expand the urban service area. And those are the types of things that, if things aren't thought of through a sustainability lens up front, it can lead to significant cost down the line that is incredibly expensive for the city. For example, the lift station in Terra Mesa that's necessary, only lift station in the city, because gravity wells don't work in that part of town. That's an incredibly expensive piece of infrastructure to install and then to maintain over time. Those are the types of things that I think need to be foreseen, and I think a sustainability plan can help. So I do think that it's a little bit of I don't think we'll have to delay it too long, and I'd be happy to even sponsor it myself if that's what's required, although I'm sure staff would support using the TID closure for that. Misty, could you give an example of or can just talk a little bit about the TID closure and what's expected in terms of the amount of money we might have?
Yeah, so I'd also like to take a chance to talk about timing a little bit. So April 15th is a magic date when it comes to TID closure. And our hope would be that the assessment claim that's outstanding will get settled in December as expected. Then we can close it and do the affordable housing extension all before that April 15th date. That would be the best, but then we still have to go through the audit process and all of that before we have that actual closure funding in place. But we'll be able to establish our plan, so knowing that that money's coming, have a plan for how we intend to spend it. That we can do prior to the audit happening, but it'll need to be the audit before we actually get that cash and able to sign contracts for it. And then as far as how much we're expecting, so based on the end of 2020 reports, and assuming that we do the affordable housing closure, there was about $10 million of funding available in the TID. That gets allocated to all of the overlying jurisdictions, of which the city is about a third. So we'll get about $3 million if all of those projections stay true. Of course, that's still subject to the different things that might happen between now and then.
So so we could start planning for the use of this TID money starting in January, as early as January? Or in December when we finally, that one little thing is out of the way?
So we could start planning for how we want to spend that money now, frankly, but it's a staff capacity issue, right? And it makes sense to do that TID closure plan at the same time we do our ARPA plan, because it's all that one-time money. We want to make sure we spend on one-time projects. So I think we could start planning on it. The plan right now is the first quarter of 2022. The big question will just be whether or not that plan will be implemented then in 2022 or if it will be 2023 when the actual closure funding comes to us. That's the part that's unknown.
Okay. Well, I would just say that in response to that, because there's concern about the lack of clarity that I want to continue with the plan with how this amendment is worded, I would say that I'd be happy to amend it to on the floor on November 9th, just to clarify and sort of direct staff to add this to the list of things that are going to be essential with that TID closure in the not following year, in the hope that the planning can start as soon as possible.
Yes, Alder Arada-Frada.
So this is for you, Misty. Do we have any funding in some of the CEDA funds that we have that we can pay for this? Or maybe we can, you know what I mean? Because this is economic development. So I was thinking it should come from some of the, I know that we had a couple of funds in CEDA. Can we pay for this or part? No, the 75,000, but part with some of the CEDA funds available?
Absolutely would be allowed. You'd want to make sure that you have CEDA's buy-in into that. And I'm not sure if Mike Z has plans for the money that's there, but that definitely would be an option that could be considered.
But if I want to move forward can I put an amendment on budget night?
Yes. I'm hesitating because it is CEDA's budget, and for CEDA to not have any chance to really weigh in on whether or not you're going to do that makes me pause.
But I am
process-wise,
it's a possibility.
I think it would be, but you'd want to make sure that gets communicated with CEDA.
No, of course, I am. But I want to say that we can, because it never occurred to me that, that until now I am thinking, I'll allow all of this, that there are some money available in CEDA funds, and this is economic development. This is what these funds should be used to. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, okay.
So the funding of it is absolutely an option. My only hesitation is the timing of it. Because it'd be great if CEDA said, yes, we want to do it, and then council does it, but yes.
Everything is possible. Okay.
All right, Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a very brief comment here that kind of links back to the Public Works staff position. And it was something that Gabriella said kind of tripped my mind, which was back when we were working on the future urban development area, which included Terra Vesta and included all these other things we're talking about tonight. One of the driving factors behind where we would plan future urban growth was what we could deal with using only gravity sewer, because we didn't want to build lift stations. And a lot of that work, a lot of the engineering work that we did to figure out where we could grow without using lift stations was done in-house. But, staff only had so much time that they could dedicate to that process. And so when Public Works was looking at that area, they said, yeah, it looks like this area can be done with gravity sewer because that actually drains to the north. It doesn't come over back to where the rest of the city is. But then once you actually get into doing the topography there, we found out something different. So I do think getting these neighborhood plans done is important, and having them done the right way is important. But this also gets back to that need, because if we're talking about if we're talking about getting this neighborhood plan done, Public Works is a big part of that, and you need the staffing in Public Works to make sure that we can get it done.
Thank you. Additional discussion? Hearing none, we will move on to the next amendment. Amendment number 5, remove officer follow-up assignment in Detective Bureau funding. And Alder Gerhart, you are the sponsor. You have the floor.
Thank you. So I've rethought this since I originally put the amendment in. Got a better understanding of what this position is, and learned that this is a position that an officer already fills, and it's just compensation for the person that's doing that role. And I believe that people should be paid what they deserve. And then also, this role is very focused on community service to the community. Therefore, I think that I think this position this amendment shouldn't have been proposed. So I'm planning to rescind this on the floor on November 9th. And I acknowledge that I think that overall my idea is that staffing is more important than one-time uses in the budget. And so I think this amendment is inconsistent with that thinking, and therefore I want to remove it.
Very good. I guess with that, I still want to offer a discussion. Seeing none, we will move on to amendment number 6. Reduce levy limit adjustment strategy earmarked for future capital. And Alder Arada-Frada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to speak to this amendment?
Yes, so as I mentioned in my introduction, this is one of the strategies that I need to use in order to fund one career firefighter. So in the mayor's proposed 2022 budget, it's assumed that $390,000 of the levy limit adjustment expected in 23 will be used for capital purchase in 2023. So this amendment reduces the earmark by $173,000, which is the police body camera purchase that is coming in 2023 in the Capital Improvement Plan 2140. This 2023 capital purchase could be funded by one-time TIC closure funding in 2022 and 2023. So Misty maybe can help me to explain what I'm trying to do here, because but this one is a strategy in order to, to move some funds from one bucket to another one, but in order for have that freed up some of the tax levy in order to fund this position. Misty, if you can.
Sure. So really what this is doing is it's saying that the body cameras that are still planned to be purchased in 2023 would be funded through the TID closure. Of course, assuming that council agrees with that when we go through the TID spending plan process. But that would be funded by there. So then the levy that we were originally going to spend on that can be reallocated to different purposes. I think the big thing with this amendment is this is a one-time purchase with those body cameras, and then we did have the replacement fund set up after that, which will set us up in the future. So I don't have a structural deficit concern about this strategy. I think the bigger piece for the council is that right now, with the earmarked amount that we're talking about, the average home will go up 3%. Actually, it's 3.1% now the assessed values came out. With this proposal, it would go up the 3.7, 3.8% instead. So if you're open to increasing taxes more, this would be a strategy to be able to do that and then spend that money on other priorities.
Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Yeah, really, I guess the main thing I want to say is that the body cameras need to be done one way or another. I proposed this in 2009. I know Steve Arnold proposed it when he was mayor. This has been something that has been in discussion for longer than just the last few years. This goes back at least 15 years, and we still haven't managed to do it. And I think it's very difficult for us to think of ourselves as a modern city when we have not provided this as a safety thing, not just for the residents of the city, but for the police officers as well. So the funding source for it isn't really an issue for me. I don't care where the money comes from as long as we make sure that we get this done.
Can I follow up?
Yes, Alder Rutherford, go ahead.
Jay, we already are using body camera for a long time. This is like we need to buy a new batch of new body cameras, but we have been using body camera for, 5 years? 2018. So this is we need to buy a new batch of new body camera, and this is because this is the amount, but, so.
Let me see. I think Mayor Richardson, you have the floor now.
Yeah, I think the one concern, and this is for a number of things that we've seen, is the projects that we're saying, oh, we're just going to fund it with the TIG closure. We're going to fund it with the TIG closure. And I don't think that we're overcommitting the money that's there, but at the same time, I also don't like essentially committing stuff to that without going through that process. It's a little bit premature. And much like we're doing right now, I think that you're better off at that point in time, you're really looking ahead from there and saying, hey, we could do this with that money and this with this money, versus this kind of ahead of time saying, oh yeah, you're going to commit this. And you're kind of saying to future, well, I don't know when we're going to do this. It'll be before the after the election, but possibly a future council, you have to do this now, or there is no guarantee that it will happen. So I guess that's just a concern I see with some of these strategies, is that we want to commit all this money to that TIG closure, which we feel pretty good about being $3 million. But there's other things that are also kind of projected to possibly be in there, like the tennis courts at McKee Farms. I mean, that's another one that, again, no guarantee, but something else that I kind of have said too, we should consider for that. So that's just where I get a little queasy on this, a little unsure, because it's scary to see all this stuff that, oh yeah, we're going to do that there, but it's not actually through that process. It's outside of that process. It's kind of like saying, oh, we're going to spend all this ARPA money on this project. Well, we need to go through the process the right way. And so that's where I think it seems like we're getting a little ahead of ourselves to commit that money now.
Okay, so following your comment, Mayor, I get what you're saying, but we are also the policy maker here, so we can, and this is my concern, that, we knew about the ARPA fund for many, many, many months, so, and this is, I think we should at least have like a wish list of the ARPA funds, and because now to determine which are some of the stormwater. I'm going to give you an example. Some of the stormwater projects that we are going to fund that maybe should be funded with the ARPA fund. Maybe we should have had that list a couple of months ago. I know that the final, regulation wasn't done, blah, blah, blah. But at least we should have done some of that. I think we can do the list. This council can work in the next couple of months and work on the closure list or wish list. And also the ARPA list, and we can do it. This council have until April next year to come up with a list and determine how we're going to use this fund. So I think that we are the policy maker, and we can make the decision. If we all agree that if we want to fund some of these amendments, and we are intentionally wanted to do it, we make the decision, so I know we can do it. I think we can work in the next couple of months and work on those lists. I don't know, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Alder Wheeler, you have the floor.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at that increase of taxes to 3.7%. I don't know what anybody else is hearing, but I'm already hearing things about 3%. And when you think about the farmers out there who don't get a lot of services, but, you know, pay a lot of taxes because of their land, and it's not like a lot of population out there, that 0.7% increase, I can tell you I will hear about it.
All right, very good. Additional discussion before we move on? Hearing none, we will move on to amendment number 7. Eliminate police small equipment replacement fund and distribute funds to specific lines. And Alder Gerhart, you are the sponsor. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, I would. Thanks. So this is a net zero change to the budget, and really it's more a transparency issue. I think a small equipment replacement fund is certainly justified for the police department, but with other replacement funds that we have in the city, you know, they're for very specific items that are clear with the replacement fund. And I know that the IT department also has one, but it's very specifically targeted to computers. Whereas the police budget has a wide variety of different things could be purchased through this. My understanding, however, is that this $20,650 is dedicated to very specific items, but that is not laid out in the budget. What will be used for in the future is not currently laid out in the budget document. So in this amendment, I suggested reallocating this to line items, so there's clarity about what will be purchased. But I understand that's not a perfect solution because this is a replacement fund that needs to build up funds over time. So if that's not amenable to the council, I would suggest that we should find a way to include an itemized list in the budget, in this budget document, that clarifies what the plan is for that money. And then we can update that year over year, even if we're not going to purchase. But I would like to find some way that we can have the plans for purchase as public record.
Very good. Discussion.
Misty, are you able to bring up that spreadsheet that the police department utilized when we created this dollar amount that identifies clearly what we intended to utilize this replacement equipment fund for? You can see the detailed list of all of the items there. That is what the department submitted in conjunction with the finance department in order to come up with the $20,650 annual allotment in that particular account. You can see that some items have a longer lifespan than others. We basically took, for example, on a radar unit, the cost is approximately $2,500 over the course of a useful life of about 15 years, equating to an annual cost of $167 times that number of radar units. And we did the same thing for all of the particular items that are listed by quantity and by item. So I think, we share your desire for budgetary transparency, Alder Gerhart, and we certainly tried to provide a high level of transparency on what we intend to purchase with that funding and when.
Alder Arata Frada, you have the floor.
Yes, as I mentioned, when I saw that when we went through the finance committee meeting with all the head of department, this is capital. I don't know why we need to have this new replacement fund here for capital expenditure, okay? Because radar, all of that are equipment. So, thank you for providing the detailed list, because I don't want to be, to some of these replacement fund used and think that I don't want my police department be using. But I think I don't understand why we need to have this. This is capital, and we're using operating to fund those. And this is the same logic that it was used before when one of my amendments someone mentioned. So my concern is we are starting accepting this type of new replacement fund. We are going to start seeing this in each department is going to require this from now on. So this is capital. This $20,000 should be in the CIP plan, in my view.
Alder Gerhart, do you have a follow-up that you'd like to address?
Yeah, Misty, I guess I have a process question for Misty. So with all of our other replacement funds, they're part of the CIP because they're more than 10,000. Is that correct?
Exactly. So the items that are on here are not capital equipment. In order to be considered capital, it has to be $10,000 individually or a group of items, like items, $50,000, and not routinely repurchased. So this is all operating small equipment purchases, not capital.
So I guess like my amendment is really about process. Like, is there, because this is kind of a unique version of replacement fund, but seems justified given the fact that the police department budget is big, there's a lot of expensive equipment that needs to be replaced. Is there a way to encapsulate that? Because this list that we show it on the screen, that's great. Like I love that there's a very specific list. I think it's a responsible way to save towards those projects. Is that a type of thing that we could include in the budget document as a reference document so that there's some clarity for the public? What that money will be used for in the future, because it can't, what I'm being told is it can't be included in the CIP. So can it be included in the budget document?
As a supporting document, absolutely, we could add it. The other option would be on that narrative sheet, I could list out kind of those individual components so that everybody could see what the individual pieces are that's on a document that's already included. Otherwise, yes, absolutely, this could be added as a supporting piece if that's would help.
Honestly, that would satisfy me in terms of just clarity on it. So I'd be happy to hear other alders have to say, but I'm going to think about maybe how to adjust this amendment to possibly keep the replacement fund, but just make sure that that information is included in the final budget packet that's released.
Can I actually answer that one quick?
Sure, go ahead.
So the final budget document that's released is actually a very condensed version, doesn't have all of that supporting documents attached to it. But I could make a note for next year to include that and then also update the internal version that we have. But it wouldn't be in that final document you're thinking of.
Okay, that works for me, and I can work on the wording of the amendment to clarify what's actually possible.
I have Alder Wheeler, and then Misty, you would have had another question, or it's been answered?
Yep.
All right, go ahead, Alder Wheeler.
Yeah, I just need a little bit of clarification. So as far as this replacement fund is concerned, what I don't see is if an officer, if a portable radio should go down, and that's about $6,000, how would that be replaced? Would it come out of this $20,000, or do we have another fund that would come out of?
So the total replacement of all of the radios is a $500,000 purchase. And so that is included in the CIP. But the individual ones, I'll let Chad do.
The police department does have funds set aside in an account for unplanned replacement or repair of small pieces of equipment. So if that were to happen, there would be funds available to do that.
Okay, is there a line item for that I missed?
I'd have to look through the budget. It would be under equipment replacement, or there's also a equipment repair account, I believe, if I recall correctly.
Okay, that makes a difference on how I think about this. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah, the sole purpose of this account that we've requested in conjunction with Misty, the equipment replacement account, is to, take out those peaks and valleys that we've tried to do in conjunction across many departments in the city. This is the strategy that was identified to allow us to set aside a certain amount a year that would replace these pieces of equipment as they come due in their useful lifespan.
Okay, additional discussion. Hearing none, we will move on to the next amendment. Amendment 8, add one additional daytime career firefighter. And Alder Arada-Frada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address your amendment?
Can we move this? Can we wait about this because the chief had to go and I want him to respond for this to help me? Can we move it?
I don't see why not.
It's your call as the chair.
Okay, we will.
Oh, he's in Zoom now?
Oh, are you,
Okay.
Chief Pulvermacher, are you on Zoom?
Where?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Okay, so I can
All right.
move. Okay. So that one, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is, I want to add one additional daytime career firefighter. The fire department asked for 2 daytime firefighters, and they were not included in the mayor's proposed budget. I am bringing 1. And then the rationale is, I don't know if you read there is a new, so as described in the new staffing proposal request, call volume is increasing, especially with the impending absorption of the portion of town of Madison, and recruitment for pay on premise or pay on call firefighting has stagnated. By adding a daytime career position, less overtime should be required to adequately staff the 27 fire service. So this position will be funded with a reduction of an earmark of the levy limit adjustment toward the 2023 capital provided in another amendment. So I will ask the chief to help me justify for this position.
Yeah,
Chief,
so thank
go
you.
ahead.
I'm sorry, Randy, do I have the
Yes,
floor?
you do have the floor. Go ahead.
So the idea is part of the justification comes through the educational piece that I've provided a couple of times, in the sense that it's becoming increasingly difficult to find daytime paid on premises firefighters. A lot of that just has to do with commitment, full-time jobs, and family commitments. So we are seeing an increase in the necessity for overtime with career staff. The idea behind daytime positions was to alleviate some of that and to also provide some, a little bit of leeway when it comes to the number of people that are available for additional, I guess, projects would probably be the best way to put it. So delegation is another benefit to these positions, in the sense that this is their full-time jobs, and it's easier to address mandates and job assignments when they have no additional career obligations. So that was the idea. We're trying to address what our recruitment looks like moving forward. Obviously, taking advantage of the paid on premises staff for as long as we possibly can, and identifying the need to transition to more career staff and do so in a way that is levy friendly.
Thank you, Chief Pulvermacher. Discussion. Alder Wheeler, you have the floor.
I just think this is why having a process or some type of forum or how we do this is important, because when we were talking about Bill, all of a sudden, it had to be a certain process, And I see the same thing here for the firefighters, because I would like to know calls for service. I would like to know what types of calls that they're going on, hours of overtime. I mean, there's a lot that's actually missing in this amendment as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's important. I don't know if the mayor could have Sarah, kind of come up with some type of process for them for reclassifications, new positions, position descriptions, and everything else. So that's just the comment that I have.
Some of the information that you requested, we receive it every month. The chief always sends us the number of calls that we receive. They have comparative, so we have some of the numbers.
Oh, I get that, but I would like to see the correlation.
Okay.
Of what's not getting done because of whatever, you're paying this amount of overtime because of, that's the kind of information.
The other question that I want to mention is, so we adding 2 police officers to the police department because of the absorption of town of Madison. And we also need to consider what we are doing for the fire department with the town of Madison too, because they're gonna be affected too. So that one we need to consider that, we are gonna get 1,500 new residents with, and also I think almost 100 new businesses. And we need to understand that the fire department not only do they go on calls, but also they do a lot of inspection work, you know what I mean? So we need to determine, okay, we are absorbing this part of the town as we are trying to, allocate to other departments capacity because of the town of Madison, I think it's imperative to also consider the fire department with a crucial department.
Oh, I'm not saying we're not in agreement. I'm just saying that it should be a process that can go across all departments. That's all.
Mayor Richardson, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I agree with things Jim said. One thing that is different about the fire department and EMS versus police is that we have mutual aid. And so we actually already are responding into the town of Madison areas because we're now the closest person there. So we've been doing that for a while. So the impact is actually not as great. I know the last two annual reports that I've seen, I believe calls were flat one year and slightly down the other. So, you don't see quite that there, and I agree some of the metrics might be missing. But what I want to speak to more is I've been thinking about this through the budget process, and for a few years, I've asked Joe to come up with some kind of a staffing long-range plan. And the more I thought about it in the last month or so, the more I felt like, you know what, that actually is probably not the right idea to put that on Joe. I think that's probably setting him up for failure because I don't want that to be Joe's plan. I want that to be something that people from council can have input, maybe people from PFC, people from the community even, so that it's something that people have buy-in to, so that if it is, oh, we want this vision, it's not, well, I don't agree with it. It's, no, this is something that as a community we came up with. And so that's something that I'm committing to doing and creating that planning, hopefully starting in January. But I think that that's something that is really important. Before we start adding all these positions, where do we want to be long term? And how do we have buy-in on that? Because I don't want to set Joe up for failure where he has to go do that. And that's maybe something that I had been asking for. And I don't want to do that to him because I think that's really key and important. Because there are challenges like staffing during the day. Absolutely, I get that. And I think that we do need to, over time, transition to more of a full-time force. But I do think that it's important to have that plan. And I talked about this earlier, and Chad and I have talked about this. For a lot of departments, we need that. And this is one of them that I think is key for that. So that's where I feel like this is premature, I think, doing some of that planning so that we have that idea of where the needs are and how to get from A to B, I think is really key and important. And we'll have some of the metrics and some of the reasoning for that with that.
Can I ask?
Yes, Alderman Frada.
So I hope, if we use the same logic, Mayor, that you're saying right now to all of the positions that you approve, you know what I mean, in the budget, on the one that, some of the positions that, but I don't see it. So I hope we have a plan. I think we should have a staffing plan for the city. And it should be, maybe something that the city administrator can put together with the help of the personnel department and so the health department. But I think we need to have a staffing planning to determine in the next 10 or 20 years, we are going to follow the metric of growth, not only the growth in population, but the growth in, economic development and new units. And then we say, okay, and compare how our staffing is accommodating to that growth. Because sometimes what we're seeing now is the city is growing maybe, 50 miles per hour, and our resources are growing at like 10, So this is where we have this big gap and needs. But I think, you approve a position in the budget, and we didn't see those metrics either, so. We have to be consistent.
Chief Pulvermacher, would you like to follow up?
Yes, thank you for that. And then I think if we've learned something this evening, we've seen the importance for a municipal staffing plan. I think when we put department against department, we put the alders in a very tough spot as far as making a decision as far as which department receives staffing for the year. If we were able to coordinate that, it makes it a much more predictable process, obviously dependent on our budget and the things that are coming in when TIDs mature, all of that. So for that, I'm appreciative of this discussion. I do want to correct one thing. We are not responding into the town of Madison right now because the city of Madison has accepted that contract, and they have not requested additional fire resources, typically partners on an automatic aid basis. So we will see an uptick in calls when we start going into the town on a greater basis because of the fact it becomes our response area. But that's all I've got in order to respond to that, and thank you for considering the overall staffing needs.
Thank you, Chief. Additional discussion? Hearing none, we will move on to amendment number 9. Increase urban forester naturalist position from 0.6 FTE to 1.0 FTE. And the sponsor is Alder Gerhardt. Would you like to speak to this, Alder Gerhardt?
Yeah, thank you so much. So our current urban forester, I'll probably reference her by name a couple of times. Her name's Anna Healy. She works 3 days per week. And what's fascinating, I think, about what I've discovered over the last year is that this position has been 0.6 full-time since 2008. And in that amount of time, 13 years, the budget has quite literally doubled from 16 million to 33 million. And our population has risen from 25,000 to almost 31,000. And as a result of that, the stresses on the forester's time have just gone up exponentially. She's also our naturalist in addition to being our forester, but she deals with all sorts of, it's interesting, forestry is labeled under parks, but really forestry is almost an independent department unto itself. She consults with the Parks Department on trees and prairie areas within the park system. She consults with Public Works on stormwater facilities and the plants that are part of those stormwater facilities. She consults on road construction projects, like the upcoming Wesley C. Road in Syene. She consults with planning staff on those upcoming projects, the planning initiatives, and then also works with developers on how to plant the trees through what the city wants to see. She consults with building inspection often because she fields complaints from residents about tree issues. And then she also is dealing with residents that are dealing with city issues, but she's constantly responding to resident complaints. And she does tree treatments, removals, plantings. She does public outreach and engages with the public. Honestly, it's just the amount of work she does in 3 days a week is like mind-boggling. And if I'm being completely honest, I think she's working more than she's being paid. And so I think the need for this is long overdue. I think that we are seeing there have been consequences to not having a full-time person all along. One of which is, the emerald ash borer problem is much worse than it might have been. We might have been able to save a lot more trees had we had the funding and had the time dedicated to that. But also just, in terms of the developments, like she just doesn't have the time to really consult in the way to truly make those decisions about trees that we would need to. And certainly if we're looking at expanding the urban service area, it's already not enough time, but if we continue to expand, it just becomes an additional stress on her time. So I think it's more than justified to bring her up to 1.0 full-time. And you heard that from the Tree Advisory Chair, Linda, and the Parks Commission Chair, Sue Easterday, at the public hearing back in October.
All right, discussion. Alder Rada-Frada.
Fully support addition to add some additional hours to this position. I am bringing an amendment, but mine is going from 0.6 to 0.8. But I am okay to support the full time. So what I want to add, besides I have some metric that I want to add. So the City of Fitchburg Urban Forester and Naturalist job was designed to plant about 100 trees per year, among other tasks that Gabriela already mentioned. And some of the actual number that I got is in 2017, 361 trees were planted. In 2018, 136. In 2019, 203 trees were planted. And in 2020, 400 trees were planted. So you can see that the metric are telling us that, that she's doing a lot of things in tree planting alone. And also the other thing that I want to mention, another metric that I want to share with you, is that the park system has grown from 527 acres in 2010 to 729 acres today. So, you know what I mean? So, and she has been in the same position since 2000. So this position has been funded at this level since 2008. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, I am fully supporting that. I think there is a need. I am in the Parks Commission, so I need to, I am learning a lot, and I am very surprised every month when we do go through the staff report from Scott, the guy in recreation, and Anna. They provide very lengthy report. So I am here to, as a park commissioner, to to support this, because I think it's something that the city needs. It's time to do it.
Additional discussion. Seeing none, we will move on to the next amendment, which is amendment number 10. Add funding for sustainability planning. And Alder Gerhart, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address your amendment?
Yes, please. Thank you. So this is adding $25,000 for sustainability planning. This was proposed by the planning department in their proposal to the mayor, but was not included. So this actually has backing of the staff. I just wanted to make that clear. $25,000 is not going to completely pay for the plan, but what it will do is kind of set the framework for what we want to do, make it clear, and also engage the public in terms of deciding what we want to move forward on. And I think I'm just going to kind of read through the rationale of the amendment, just kind of think it says it more succinctly than I will just going off the top of my head. I mean, ultimately, I think a sustainability plan is essential as Fitchburg continues to grow and change, and we are a very fast-growing city, so it's even more necessary for us. We're actually the largest city in Dane County that does not have a sustainability plan, which is something that Phil Groupie included in his staff memo. Ultimately, I think, well, my ultimate concern is that it allows us to be more resilient to climate change impacts and costs. And we can do things like research ordinance changes that can be important as we expand the urban service area. That includes things like stormwater. It allows us to really, truly think strategically about how we can utilize environmental practices to save the city money. I know you've all heard me harp on and on and on about hybrid electric vehicles. I do that because I think it's absolutely essential to transition our fleet to hybrid and electric before we start seeing increases in gas prices, which are going to come sooner or later. And so it's not just about environmental responsibility. It's also about cost savings. It's always tied to cost savings for the city. And then ultimately, we can be that more environmentally responsible city and regionally, which we've declared multiple times in resolutions. The sustainability specialist, Phil Groupie, put together a nice memo in support of this, and I won't harp on every single thing, but I think it's well written and kind of clarifies that this is something that the city has declared it's an important thing to do. And as I made the point before, I think this is an important thing to do before or in conjunction with the Stoner Prairie neighborhood planning, because this has to be the context. This has to be a lens by which we look at our growth. And I think ultimately that will make us a more responsible city. And ultimately, I think it will save us a lot of money by not making mistakes that could be avoided by thinking comprehensively about it.
Okay, very good. I will open it up for discussion. Yes, Alder Maldonado, you have the floor.
I'll say, as a graduate of Edgewood's sustainability program in 2012, I fully support this. Can you talk a little bit about how this plan will be laid out? Will it be an independent, organization, or will it be, additional on Phil's time? How will it be implemented?
Yeah, so we've talked quite extensively about this in Resource Conservation Commission over the course of the year. Phil Groupie would be the lead on it, but I know he would consult with other staff in the planning department. But ultimately, think we get to decide what we want to do with it. I know the RCC wants to be involved in the process, but I think engaging the public, there are a lot of advocates for climate change. You definitely heard their names because they've written in support of different amendments related to sustainability or renewable energy. And we have some very talented and very intelligent people in the city that I know would be delighted to kind of help set the direction of this plan and bring their expertise to the table. And so I think it really is up to us what we wanted to do. I have a very specific focus on climate change. I think no matter what, this will be a part of that, but we can also broaden it out to more than just that. It does not have to be. Phil Groupie kind of goes through this in his memo, but the sustainability plan is very flexible between different departments. But I think that I would hope that we have a very detailed plan that really brings together all the things that we're already doing and think strategically about how we can move forward in the most efficient way.
So just my follow-up to that, is there, resources, whether it be the university or nonprofit organizations or, other sort of resources that would be able to add to the capacity of this plan? Because 25,000 is not a ton, but I mean, I know we have a lot of wealth in this community just around intellectual capital and, folks who are able to contribute in other ways.
I mean, it's a great question. I would hope that, I hope that there are people in the city that maybe we could do an ad hoc committee that could help contribute. There are people, I mean, I don't want to say their names without, they're not in the official committees, but I can connect you with people that can explain in detail why this is important. And I'm sure some of them will show up on November 9th to give their perspective. But I think, yes, we can utilize resources. I think we won't quite know the answer to that question until we've invested the initial amount to put in the work. But I do think there are university resources, like I know universities, which is kind of a hard thing to say, but cities is CITIES, like city, is an option for utilizing UW resources to get things done. And I believe that Monona actually did their sustainability plan using that university program. But Monona is significantly smaller than us, so I think they're kind of in a different situation.
So one, reiterate my support. Two, definitely think that there's a lot of excitement in just terms of kind of building up the ability of this project to do more than even what we budget for it. So,
Laura Frada, you have a question or?
I have a comment. I think this sustainability plan is great. It's something that when the mayor asked, what are your initiatives to put in the budget, I mentioned in one of the meetings that we need to have a resilient plan for the city, because I really believe in the next 10 to 20 years, the threat that this city is going to have is going to be the effect of climate change. And we are seeing what it's doing in some areas in our city. So I think we need to be prepared, and we need to set up the foundation, and we need to have a resilient plan. So I think this one is a great initiative.
Yes, Alder Gerhardt, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to add one more thing too. I mean, we've struggled a lot with stormwater projects and prioritizing them, and I know each one of us in our districts has had to fight for our projects. I think stormwater issues, are not only climate change, but there's definitely a climate change consideration in terms of this area is projected to have more rain and more intense short duration rainstorms that can create flooding issues, flash flooding issues. But anyway, I think a sustainability plan could also potentially create like kind of a framework for how to evaluate these stormwater projects and think through these in a more strategic way, so that, I mean, the same way that a staffing plan would work, making sure that we're doing it in the most, lay out a plan for it and have that drive the decisions rather than just, other considerations. So it's something, I know stormwater has been very important to this council in particular, and this plan I think could certainly help with that.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we will move on to Amendment 11. Increase urban foresters naturalist position from 0.6 to 0.8 FTE. And Alder Arata Frada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address this amendment?
I think I already, I already spoke about why it's needed on the previous amendment. So that's it.
Okay. Before moving on, is there additional discussion on this particular amendment? Hearing none, we will move on to amendment number 12. Add reclassification of 3 full-time firefighters to lieutenants. And Alder Arata Frada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address your amendment?
Thank you. So for the new alders, this is the third time that I'm bringing this forward, okay? And it was the third one and the last. So this is a reclassification of the 3 full-time firefighter to lieutenants. It's only $22,000. So this amendment will allow the Fitchburg Fire Department to proceed with the reclassification of 3 full-time firefighters to lieutenants. This promotion that were approved in 2017, but not budgeted in recent years. This proposal does not change the total number of staff positions in the fire department. The chief can help me with this, but in 2019, during the 2019, the fire department adjusted its budget to cover this additional expense of personnel costs for the full-time lieutenant promotion, but the council took it out from the 2020 budget. So I want to mention that because for the new alders that so this has been in the pipeline for a long time. So I will ask the chief for additional comment.
Chief Pulvermacher, you have the floor.
He's there?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So yeah.
You're
As,
breaking up.
this is,
Not a good connection.
all right. I'm about 2 minutes away from City Hall. I'll be there in council chambers shortly.
Okay, so so the other thing that I want to add in the package, you could see there is additional information, and also the chief sent additional information, the organizational chart proposed. So I don't know if you had the opportunity to review these charts and the additional information, but yes, so I don't know, you want to wait for the chief?
Well, I did see a hand. Alder.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. So as indicated, this has been ongoing. The department had a staffing study done in 2014. In that, its first line leadership was identified as in need of correction or restructuring. We had been in the process of restructuring that first line leadership, and these three promotions were actually identified prior to my arrival. We tried to put them in place. What we found was that the total cost of the promotions were not identified through the operating budget. So we made those adjustments, and as indicated by Alder Arata Frada, the promotions were still not funded for a variety of different reasons. So we continue to address this overall need because of the fact that the first line leaders are the ones that actually have direct impact on things that we do with recruitment, retention, and training. And right now our span of control is well beyond what would be considered acceptable limits within the fire service. So we continue to bring it forward because first line leadership is needed, supervision is needed, and ultimately training is obviously of benefit when our paid on premises staff have a tendency of staying about 2 to 5 years. So we have a constant need for training.
Okay. Very good. Additional discussion.
So Joe, are you paying firefighters now acting pay to be in that position when need be, or they're just on their own?
They get a stipend right now. It's not a true acting pay. Typically, acting pay has a tendency of paying at the rate of the position that they're filling. So they get a stipend for assuming the role as a company officer. But typically, that only really identifies what their role is during emergencies. What I also need assistance with is what happens in the station and for preparation. And that's typically done by somebody who has been sworn into that position.
Mayor, do you have your hand raised? I'm having difficulty seeing that. If so, you have the floor.
Yeah, just one quick thing. I think that this is where having that planning is going to be really helpful, because the one concern is that, as you can see here, they're being called management positions and they're being paid as management positions, but if they were management positions, they also wouldn't be union positions, and they are. And so there's just, it's not quite, there's something that needs to be kind of solved and fixed. And so because they do like half of what a management position should be, but not the full thing. And so that's where, again, the planning and what's the structure and what makes sense needs to happen before we start doing this. And I think that the other concern is just that, well, depending on what we do with our positions, there's 12 full-time firefighters. I guess there'll be 13, because the one position I had that I added for the fire department will be in there, and 6 of them would be lieutenants. And so the other people are paid on call, but for your full-time firefighters, half of them essentially are going to be lieutenants, which is a little bit funny as well when you're looking at structure. So I think that's where, before we start doing all these things, we need to have a good idea and plan and evaluate, okay, what truly is a lieutenant and where is that fit? And if they are management, then that really means that they aren't part of the union anymore either. And where does that fit in there? It's a challenge, and that's why it needs to be more of a thought out process versus just, here, let's just do this. How does it fit into the structure?
Alder Arada Frada, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I don't understand your logic, Mayor. I'm sorry, but this position has been approved in 2017. So there was a staffing study done in 2014. So so I think the due diligence was done here. So this is what I understand when you said we need to do more staffing and planning. I think the planning was done. This position were approved in 2017, but they were never funded. So this is the difference. We're never funded. So I think that this is the time to, and I imagine that yes, there is the distinction before this position that they are going to be in union or outside the union. I think this is something that I imagine that the information is very well known. So this is what I don't understand your logic about planning. This staffing planning, because this is something that it was already planned way back.
Yeah, if I can just add. So when we had 6 lieutenants, 3 of them were paid on call lieutenants, which is a lot different than having full-time firefighters be lieutenants. And so that's where that change was made, where I don't know, what exactly happened at that point. I don't know if that was my first year in council. It was a long time ago. So anyway, when we had more lieutenants, when those were approved, it was 3 full-time and 3 paid on call lieutenants. And that's where the difference is that I don't know if it was decided that paid on call people shouldn't be lieutenants or what, but there is a difference between what had done previously and what this is right here.
Chief Pulvermacher, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, thank you. I think the overall impression of what a lieutenant does isn't necessarily that of management as much as supervision. What we have the lieutenants participate in is overall reporting on individuals, training on individuals. They will do performance evaluations. But when it comes to interpersonal and disciplinary, that's when the command staff gets involved. That's a non-union position, truly a management position. As far as the work of the lieutenants, we used to have 12 lieutenants, 9 of which were paid on premises, paid on call, 3 were career. What ends up happening is those career lieutenants actually assume direct supervision of the paid on call, paid on premises staff. That typically wasn't done in the past. One of the reasons why we're stepping away from as many paid on premises lieutenants is because of the fact that we're not maintaining the longevity that is needed for somebody to have as much experience to be a supervisor. So at 2 to 5 years, we're asking them to do something that they really are not prepared to do if we're asking them to be lieutenants, which is why we made the transition. It sort of speaks to why we need to take a look at career versus paid on premises over the long term because of the transitioning of the workforce. The workforce is just not a part-time workforce as much as it once was. And so we did benefit from that for a long time as the city of Fitchburg, and we just have to figure out how we move forward with more career firefighters and what role they fill, especially from a supervisory level.
Further discussion? Hearing none, we will move on to the next amendment. Amendment 13, adding funding for tree plantings. Alder Gerhart, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address your amendment?
Yeah, thank you. And this one, I think we can be really quick, but I'd love to hear, so this is very obvious. I think there needs to be more funding for tree plantings. I think there hasn't been enough for a long time, and I understand that that's due to budget constraints. However, when I approach budget amendments, one of the things I do is I put in the items that I think should be in there, even if it's not necessarily a possibility. So I think this is something we should do. I think as we can work through these amendments on November 9th, I think it's worth consideration about potentially reducing this amount so that we get some additional money for trees, even if it's not my wish list number of 15,000. But I thought it was important to put in here because I do think it's something that should be in the city budget if it were possible.
Very good. I'll open the floor to discussion. Alder Herbst.
I'm not opposed to trees, tree planting. I'm actually, my father and I manage 160 acres of forested land that my ancestors homesteaded. Very knowledgeable trees. The town of Madison coming up, I just think we need to stay focused, keep things absolutely necessary, in our budget. And once we get past town of Madison, I'd be more amenable to, to support this, but not right now.
All right. Alder Strassman, you had your hand up. You have the floor.
Yes. I was wondering, do we know how many trees have been cut down due to our development that we've had so far in Fitchburg?
So Anna Healy does keep a tree inventory. I don't have those numbers on hand at the moment, but I can get them. I'm sure I can get them to you. One thing I did note that I didn't mention in my introduction was there's a lot of trees that are planned for removal next year due to the emerald ash borer problem. And my understanding is that there is actually not enough money in the budget to replace all the trees that we are removing. So there is kind of a concern there, but I will find that answer for you, Shannon.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, I know there was a wide concern on the new Lacey Road, how many of the mature trees that were going to be cut down. And I just kind of wondered, what we're doing to kind of combat that as far as, our new construction, what we're doing to combat that,
Yeah. It's something we definitely talk about in tree advisory. And obviously that's not necessarily a budget discussion, but I would be happy to chat with you more about that and send you some stuff from tree advisory if you want to know more, because I think about this a lot and I also agree that that's important.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Let me know.
Awesome.
Alder Maldonado, you had your hand raised earlier. Is it still raised?
No, I'll withdraw my question.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Further discussion? Oh, Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Yeah, some of this is not just about the number of trees, which I know sometimes we get focused on, but some of them is what kinds of trees there are. Like, you know, and a lot of the new development goes, sadly, in farmland, and a lot of the trees that are lining farms tend to be things like box elders and other stuff that aren't really necessarily quality trees. I know when we do work on development plans with the developers, we'll try to make sure that if there's oak trees or established maple trees or things like that, that they try to preserve them as they go about building roads and houses within an area. But I guess my question was, with this particular $15,000 item, what's your vision for where these trees would go? Are you looking at just at replacing trees that have to be removed for one reason or another, or are these new trees, maybe street tree plantings? What's the vision for this?
I mean, I would certainly defer to Anna if she had specific ideas, but I think the first line of action would be to replace the trees that are planned to come down next year. And possibly if there was the ability to replace, maybe we could remove a few more and replace them with new trees. But yeah, I think it's a priority to make sure that we fill some of the areas that have fewer trees on the whole. The city in the comprehensive plan has a goal of a 30% tree canopy. And we have a long way to go to get there. So I think adding more trees to existing streets, making sure we have funding for high quality trees for the new construction projects. I think all that is connected, but I would probably defer to Anna about her expertise about where she thinks the greatest need is. And there is a need. It's just a matter of how much money we can put into it.
Additional questions? Discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next amendment. Amendment number 14, increase paid on premise, paid on call, firefighter starting wage. And Alder Arada-Frada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address your amendment?
Of course. So this is this amendment is about increasing the starting pay on promise and pay on call firefighter from $8.5 an hour to $8.67 is a 2% increase. So it was surprising to me when I learned that, first of all, that the wage factor or the base wage, that is the base wage is $8.5 per hour. Okay, and then the other one is that how do we adjust this wage every year? I think we need to think if we are an equitable organization. I think we need to provide, if we are increasing 2% to the rest of the city employees, the salary every year, I think we should be doing the same for this, the pay on call, because they are also city employees. So this is what is the logic behind this amendment, is to start updating this, they call is a base wage. If you look at and then there is an additional information here in the package. So how the structure of the pay on call, pay on promise firefighter rate is calculated. So there are other additions to the salary. It's according to the certification, other skills. So my idea was to start with the factor wage, that is 8.5, and to start increasing 2% COLA like the rest of the employee in the city, in City Hall. I don't know, maybe where is Joe? I don't know if he wants to make a comment here.
I'll just comment. I agree with you. It doesn't happen very often, but
Thank you.
I agree with you.
I appreciate that. And I think this is another tool to increase recruitment. You know, it's not too much, but, you know. Go ahead. Can you explain what is important to?
Yeah, so as far as the paid on premises and the paid on call hourly rate, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is address this gradually versus all at once, to be able to support the fact that our paid on premises firefighters are making about the same wage as our neighbors. So I think it's something that we address from a comparison standpoint. We take a look at what others are doing, and I think if we're truly going to stay on top of it so it's not one big bulk assessment at some point, is what does it look like to gradually increase these numbers in accordance with maybe what the full-time contingent is making. I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know the overall necessity of reporting that differently or allocating that differently. But I do think it's something that we need to stay on top of, just to stay competitive with our neighbors.
Very good. I will open up for additional discussion. Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the next amendment. Amendment number 15. Add 2 speed feedback boards at Seminole Highway and Schuman Drive. And I am the sponsor of this amendment. Let me find my notes here. As some have indicated, the number of times around for amendments. This is my second time around with this amendment. The proposed amendment, this amendment proposes the placement of 2 speedback boards at the Seminole Highway pedestrian crossing at Schuman Drive. The cost of each sign is $4,000, depending on where it is located and who is installing it. There may be additional cost for poles, bases, up to $1,000 per sign. Total of $5,000 per sign. And the rationale: the location is adjacent to the Seminole Pool and Tennis Club, which has a great deal of children and family activity during the summer months. Traffic is expected to increase in volume given the development that's further south. This intersection is already the site of the second most crashes within Fitchburg, according to the 2021 Bike and Pedestrian Crossing Data Collection and Prioritization Summary Data. 2 speed feedback boards are the most feasible and cost-effective way to protect the safety of the public. Now, this amendment was, when it was presented last year, I had proposed the flashing caution lights, and there were a number of individuals that spoke out against those lights. It was suggested that I maybe take this route to add the feedback boards, and I thought that was a great idea. We're thinking of 1 on each side, heading north and heading south. And there was some discussion last year that there was no data. As you'll see this time around, there is data from our engineering department, and the data not only was provided from our engineering department, but Alder Gerhardt, you have passed the same information on to us council members a number of times. So I will open the floor for discussion. Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Yeah, Randy, why was there, I wasn't around last year, so why was there opposition to the yellow lights?
My understanding is that they were basing it on their experience with McKee Road prior to the pedestrian bicycle bridge over McKee Road. The lights would go on, traffic would stop, people would rear end the other vehicles.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, we could get into all that discussion about
No, I think this is a fine thing to do.
Yeah.
I just wondered what the specific concern was with the flashing lights. Are these signs going to be solar powered, or are they going to have to be wired up?
Active, solar powered. I would rely on Public Works to make that decision, but That's my intent.
Very good.
Yeah. Alder Herbst.
Randy, I think that's a good compromise. I didn't like the flashing lights, it leads to cars being rear-ended. I think this is a good solution. I would add, though, the accidents at that intersection, I work right there. Those are, I think, almost entirely vehicle accidents, not bicycles haven't been involved, but I support this. It's a safety enhancement. I see this, virtually every day, that crossing.
All right, well, thank you. Anybody that's walked this intersection, in which there is a good amount of foot traffic, it is it's a little hairy. So thank you for that. Alder Arada Frada, you have the floor.
I agree that this is a better option than last year. My question to you is, you are increasing the levy by $10,000. Did you submit? I didn't see any amendment from where the money is going to come.
I'm going to defer to Misty.
So there was about $12,000 of capacity left within the mayor's budget. So the anticipation, nothing else passes in just this one, it would still be within the levy limits.
And then just as an additional note to that, I believe last year's was around $21,000, so it's been significantly reduced, at least within this request. Additional questions? Hearing none, we'll move on. Please consider this amendment. So, moving on to the next amendment, which is amendment number 16. Add funding for native plantings in Fitchburg parks. And Alder Gerhart, you are the sponsor. Would you like to speak to amendment number 16?
Yes, please. So this is another one of my wish list items, something that I'd like to see. I think you all know our park system is so big. It's wild, and that it requires a lot of maintenance, regular maintenance, and there's quite a lot of turf grass in the city, and I'm confident that there are certain areas that are regularly mowed but underused by citizens. So this proposal would just create a new kind of native planting area. It has multiple benefits. We could probably choose the location intentionally to maximize the groundwater infiltration potential, which can be a stormwater mitigation technique. It also would be a great place for pollinators. Where it's located could also be based on the need for that. I think it's a great educational opportunity. We can intentionally make the design of this area of the park meant to explain the value of native plants. And then also I think it just can be a really beautiful place if you create some sort of path. Ideally one that wouldn't need to be mowed as often, so that people could hike and enjoy in the city. So it's a wish list item. I don't necessarily think it would pass, but I think it would be a lovely thing if we can find some funding here and there to add to the park system and lower the maintenance costs. And I'd love for Scott to weigh in.
Scott, are you there to?
Yep. I am, and actually, I certainly appreciate this amendment. I did want to provide some additional information for for amendment number 13 with the additional tree funding, if I might.
I'm sorry, is that a question or?
Yeah, I'd like to provide some additional. Certainly not about this amendment, but amendment number 13, I've got some additional information that I might be able to provide to help with that decision.
Ultimately, it's up to you as the chair,
Yeah.
if you want to go back or not.
If you would, just keep it brief, since we have already spoken to number 13, and we'd like to continue to move on, but go ahead.
Well, I could do a memo, that's for sure.
No, I mean, go ahead, Scott.
Yep, and actually, I just wanted to provide some clarification that we do have 3 separate funding sources for tree planting. We have improvement fees when a new park is developed. We do receive improvement fees. So for new parks, we utilize that source of funding to plant trees. Also, the developer, when there's a new development that comes in town, they provide funding for the new street trees. So this $15,000 wouldn't affect those 2 areas. The areas that would be affected by this is basically replacement trees, emerald ash trees that are removed, or some additional trees within our current parks. And maybe just to give you a perspective, we currently have $10,000 in the operating budget, which allows us about 35 new trees a year. And this additional 15,000 would allow for 50 new trees each year. And typically we'll remove just ash trees, anywhere from 125 to 150 per year. So just to give some additional information and context to that amendment.
Very good. Additional discussion? Yes, Alder Herbst, go ahead.
I agree, I agree with both, 13 or 15 and 16, both of those, just not this year. We gotta get through town of Madison. I'm a big prairie plant supporter, naturalist, but I gotta stay focused on our basics for this year.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will move on to the next amendment, which is amendment number 17. Add funding to pilot sustainable vegetation in street medians. Alder Gerhart, you're the sponsor for this one as well. You have the floor.
Yep, that's me. So this is an idea that I've read some other municipalities in other parts of the country are starting to do this a little bit more. But in general, the thing that always prompts me to think about it is when I'm driving down McKee Road or Fish Hatchery and I see these lawnmowers riding on these very, very small medians on busy roads, and those men and women that are mowing those lawns. I think it's absolutely ridiculously dangerous for very little purpose, in my opinion, that can't be granted by a different plant. So the idea behind this would be to find an area that we could pilot this, remove the turf grass, and replace it with something that does not need to be mowed. So that could be native plants, that could be wildflowers, that could be kind of a low profile plant that doesn't require mowing. I think fescue is one of the options when I talked to Anna about it. But something that would never need to be mowed, so we reduce that ongoing cost to the city, and also, maintain the green or the beauty of the median, but reduce those maintenance costs and that danger to the workers that do end up mowing there. I think that if we can get this pilot done, I would hope that we could expand it across the city over time. But my other hope is that we could use this to decide what to do with the new streets we're building, because presumably our new streets that are coming on the line might have some turf grass in the plans, and I would prefer that is changed. And I'd like to see. I think we should practice a little bit somewhere in the city before we add that in. So that's the idea behind this. Again, it's another wish list item, but hoping that maybe after we get through the earlier amendments, if there's some money left, could be an interesting thing to choose. But I'd love to hear what people's thoughts on this.
Question.
Yeah, can I speak?
Yes, Alder Radefrada.
Gabriela, this is something that I heard some of the park commissioner talking about this. I think this is a great idea. I think we should implement that not only on medians, but also in some area of our parks. There are some parks that we mow a lot. People don't use those grassy areas. That where we need to start thinking about how we can plant native plants to also, because it help with the absorption of water. So I think this is a great idea. Maybe it's something that, I don't know, is part of the park revision that we are doing, but we are talking about all of this in our meetings. So, but this is a great idea.
Alder Maldonado, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. I like the idea too. The question that I have, one, is this something that's been done in other cities, municipalities? And then two, I would imagine, but I'm not certain, is there like sort of a long-term cost reduction in the fact that you're not bringing maintenance out as often to do this? Like, is there some sort of long-term cost savings? And then three, I would imagine there's also like if this happens and is successful, would there be either volunteers or anything like that who would be willing to kind of do this on future medians? You know, if it's something that has appeal and, you know, we like it, the public likes it.
Yeah. So starting with, other cities that have done this, I have found some examples. Most of the ones that I found just through searching online were people that were planting native vegetation, which, I haven't seen, they didn't include pictures of the exact place it is, but I know that there is challenges to that if you don't have a large space, especially if it's right up next to the street, because native planting sometimes have to have burns. Not ideal for a road. Also, the salt gets in there over the course of the year, so some natives couldn't sustain that amount of salt over the course. So there's there's more limited number of plants that could fit this specific category. But there are plants out there that are options, and I'm interested in, if we had funding for this, I'd be happy to help staff or kind of on my own try to find some more examples and make some calls. I'd love to do that if it's useful to the staff. I think it'd be fun to kind of look into it and see what else has been done out there, what's been successful. But even if you go to West Town Mall, there's some new native prairie plantings in that area on your way to get onto the highway. There's some analogs like that, but our medians are kind of narrow, so those might not be perfect analogs. In terms of cost savings, I think for like a pilot where we're just piloting it, I'm not sure that would yield cost savings, but I know I don't know if you remember, but back when we approved the contract for the mowing services, I asked a million questions, and that was all in the lead up to this, because we do pay quite a lot in contracting costs. And if you remember from that budget amendment, we got a pretty good deal for this company that's mowing our grass on a 3-year contract. But the other quotes for that were almost double. I think it was close to double what the other ones are. And that says to me is that those costs in 3 years are likely to go up quite a lot higher, and reducing the amount that we need to mow, I think actually could potentially yield cost savings within a few years, significant cost savings within a few years. But I think we have to invest in it up front, which is why I really would like to see it in the new road projects. I don't want us to plant turf grass there and create an additional thing that we would need to fix down the road. And then I guess the last thing in terms of volunteers, Anna, our forester, she would be in charge of obviously choosing the plant that we'd use. I know I would hope that we do a lot of public engagement, so I imagine that people might come out if that's appropriate. I don't know if that planting would be appropriate for volunteering, especially if you're talking about street medians. There seems like a danger liability issue there. So maybe not for this, maybe if we did in the parks, we could utilize volunteers. But I also understand that there's working on a Friends of the Parks group. And so hopefully that could be leveraged in the future to help support these types of projects.
Randy?
Alder Herbst.
Alder Maldonado, a very good, comment about the volunteers. You see, as you drive around the state, highways, this service group is picking up the highway or whatever. So we would move to this. I think we need to rely on, ask people to volunteer to take this on. I've done quite a few prairie restorations. And you say, is there cost savings? Well, initially, it takes quite a bit of manual labor to get it set up. Over several years, you might have to burn, that initially it would cost you more, but in the long term, you probably get you get to a break even. But if we could get volunteers, say a certain amount of people, they would take Lacey Road. I think this could be an incredible success for the city. But again, I'd like to delay it a year.
Thank you. Mayor Richardson.
Yeah, when I was in college, one summer I actually worked for the Fitchburg Parks Department. And one of the jobs that I had was push mowing the medians along Fishhatchee Road all the way down to Greenway Cross at that point in time. So I can tell you it does suck. It is not fun. And so I'm very actually intrigued by this. I think it's something that especially if we can figure out if it's low maintenance or no maintenance, even if it doesn't fit here in the budget, it is something that I think would be an interesting thing to add into the list of projects for when we close our TID as a pilot, because I think there could be a lot of value in doing this and expanding this.
And you're still alive to tell the story.
Barely.
That's terrifying.
Well, while we're on this discussion, I'm going to ask a question. Why would we just, if there's a matter of a cost involved and there's mowing involved, why would we not just let the grass grow? What's wrong? I mean, it sounds like there's a great amount of expense and capital that has to go into replanting everything. And the reason I ask this is because when I was at Four Winds last week with a number of agricultural farmers, outside of Four Winds, the main entrance is nothing but grass. And it's very attractive. They're not cutting it. So I don't know if it's a special type of grass, or I just wondered if we're going to the infinite degree of changing something at an extremely high cost when maybe there's a simpler, less expensive solution. That's all I'm asking.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, Alder Rutherford, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the costs, grassy areas, when they're well maintained, they look great, but you need to water them, you need to maintain. The other thing that I was doing some research too about, since I am in Parks Commission, about some parks here in Fitchburg that we have low areas where they get flooded. There are no trees. For some reason, they are grassy areas, we had to maintain, cut the grass, Why do we don't convert those in prairie areas? Why we don't convert in prairie area? Because they are gonna help with the absorption of water. They are gonna help with the, Gabriela mentioned there are other benefits with pollination and all of that stuff that I am learning with Dave and his group of people doing the prairie restoration. So there are plenty of benefit that, yes, grass is great, but also you need to water, and water is becoming, you need to water to maintain this,
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish and then I'll
But it's what I say, I will say that there are some costs associated at the beginning, but then we need to think about the environment. So this is how I see it, is investing in the environment, creating this prairie, they can help us to solve, maybe some other issue that we have with.
No, I think I'm in full agreement with what you're stating. I'm going to ask a question, why do we have to water it? There are plenty of lawns who do not water, and it comes back every year. I mean, it's just a natural for grass to come back. I mean, it can take a lot of abuse. I'm not advocating that we have to. I'm just offering another solution than we have a grassy area that we're paying a lot of money to cut, maintain, and then we're going to rip it out, put in new plantings when there might just be another alternative. That's all I'm asking. And
I mean, can I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think it's certainly an interesting idea. I mean, if Public Works and Parks, I think the Parks Department manages the grass and the medians, if I'm not mistaken. But whoever is involved in it, maybe we could choose an area and let it grow and just see what happens.
Right.
My understanding about turf grass is it's not really native, so it doesn't have those additional benefits like pollinators. I think the reason we mow it is just because it looks nicer. And I guess I would. But that being said, I think there would be no reason to not try and see what it looks like. If the Parks Department was willing to pick up an area that we could try next year, I see no reason why but I just think ultimately, if we are able to implement this, sustainable vegetation, or what I've classified as sustainable vegetation, I think it's just beautiful. Like, I think it just looks beautiful on our streets and has those additional benefits like habitat for pollinators.
Mm-hmm. Alder Herps, you had your hand raised earlier. No? All right. All right. Alder Strassman, go ahead.
So pretty much what we really need to do is kind of find out, we've got to find whatever native plants can sustain the salt and kind of the wear and tear of our roads, pretty much, and kind of figure out what works. Do we have a plan with our Parks Department to figure out what that could be?
So I've had an initial conversation with Anna Healy about it, and she came up off the top of her head just with several different options that we could explore. I think the next step might be to see if there's anyone else in the state of Wisconsin or a northern state that deals with regular snowfall and salting the roads, that could, give us some insight into how it would work. But yeah, there are options out there. There are 100% options out there that just off the top of Anna's head without any initial research could be potentials. But it would be cool to kind of see, and maybe that also brings up an issue of salting. Maybe we have to reevaluate our salting practices and see if there's any way that we could potentially use less salt. I know we do have some best practice, but it'd be interesting to see if there's any sort of more cutting edge techniques that allow us to lower the amount of salt. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I honestly think it would be a great idea to save money in the long run if we could find something that would be beautiful and, all around. We wouldn't have to mow and have the grass and, it would be really nice to be able to find a solution to put some native plants there that we don't really have to worry about.
Before I go to Bill, there is some medians as you come off of Highway 14 and turn onto Lacey Road that have plantings as well that are beautiful. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but other than when they get too high, it's hard to see traffic. But go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, on Fish Hatchery Road, we have exactly what you're talking about. We designed that. We had a landscape architect vet all of those plantings, and we have 2 prairie planting mixes that are going to go in out there on all the medians south of Traceway Drive. So we do have mixes that are salt sustainable or tolerant to salt, and a great mix of flowers and pollinators and everything. That was one of our requirements that we had with the DNR, that we provide that because of the bumblebees that are going to be traveling through the area. So we do have those mixes available, so it'd be just a matter of picking up this seed mix and picking an area we want to put it.
Okay, very good. It's good to know. Additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next amendment, which is Amendment 18, Add Hearing Conservation Program. And Alder Arata Frada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yeah, so I'm going to do an introduction, and then Sarah Olson is here. So this is something that this amendment is to add funding to establish a hearing conservation program for employees that are exposed to vehicle, equipment, tools, etc. in the Department of Public Works, Utility Parks, Street Police, and Fire. Hearing exam will be provided annually upon hiring and termination. Sarah can explain why it's important to do that. It's a levy increase in the amount of $6,550, and the funding for this is going to come from the $12,000 left in the tax levy. Sarah?
Yeah, good evening. This is a really important amendment here. This came out of our safety team. We have a city safety team that meets every quarter. And we had met with CIVMIC, who's our risk management company, and they were surprised to hear that we don't already have hearing exams for all of our staff who work in loud positions that are exposed to loud noises. So they had advised us that we should have a hearing conservation program for public works, police, and fire employees. And there should be a test, upon hire annually, and then even as they leave, for example, retirement, because somebody can file a workers' comp claim for hearing loss even after they've left the company, even 5 years later. So CIVMIC does see those claims come through, and so this just helps us better gauge, whether we are providing the right hearing equipment and keeping our employees safe so they don't experience that hearing loss.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion. Alder Gerhardt, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember Sarah mentioning this in a personnel committee meeting a little while back, and I fully support this. I think I learned a little while back, I met the scientist that studies fish hearing, because fish can actually regenerate their hearing cells, and trying to figure out if there's a way to extend it to humans. Because for humans, when your hearing cells die because of loud noises, it never regrows. It is not a thing that has stem cells that regrows. So it's like, once it's dead, your hearing is gone. And so that zero-sum game, I think, is always really concerning. And a lot of what Parks Department workers and public works workers and people that are working around loud noises, if they're not wearing proper protection, yeah, it can be devastating. So I fully support this. I think this is a very, very good use of $7,000.
Additional discussion? Yes, Alder Herbst.
For Chad and Bill, don't our employees have access to hearing protection? I expect we do, right? And are they required to use it as part of their condition of employment?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Additional discussion?
Can I ask another question to Sarah?
Alder Rada.
Sarah, this is going to be like a mandatory, we have to do this, isn't it? It's not like an option.
It's OSHA mandated. So while we are, we fall under the Department of Public and it's DPS, DPSP or DSPS. I'm sorry. It's not OSHA, but this is an OSHA recommendation, and it's really important. Even though we provide hearing equipment, we still need to measure, is that hearing equipment still protecting that hearing? This is pretty common. Other municipalities, our neighbors, everyone's doing this. They bring, it's called Medivan. They come on site, and it's done on work time. It just takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and then they're done. And that's the extent of the hearing exam that they have to get every year. But it's really common. This isn't a unique program.
Is this, I heard you mention mandatory, and then I heard recommendation. So is this a mandatory or is it a recommendation?
It's mandatory by OSHA, but we are under DSPS. That's who regulates us. So for example, we don't get inspected by OSHA. We fall under a state program that makes sure that we are operating in a safe manner. So it's not necessarily, we don't fall under OSHA, so it's not necessarily mandated, but it's strongly recommended. And we're one of the only ones in the CivMix grouping of all of the municipalities that they support that don't do this. So yeah, you're right. It's not, because we don't fall under OSHA, we don't have to do this, but it's very strongly recommended by a risk management company.
I'm guessing that's why we don't probably do it, because it's not mandated, but okay. Additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next amendment, which is amendment number 19, add water fountain at McKee Farms Park inclusive playground. And Alder Rada, you are the sponsor. Would you like to speak to amendment number 19?
Of course, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I am not asking for levy increase, okay? So I think you all approve this. This one is, since inclusive playground is a different type of playground that had to follow more strict regulation, we need to have a water fountain in the park. And this is what I am proposing to add this, because there is one in the splash pad, and there is another one behind the kid crossing. The kid crossing is not accessible because if you have kids with wheelchair and walkers, it's gonna be it's not gonna be the ideal situation to go up to, the kid crossing. It's gonna be too far away, and there is no good connectivity on path. The one in the splash pad, remember that when we talk about kids with some sort of disability, there can be sensorial liability and disability or other type that even though we are going to try to connect the splash pad with the inclusive playground, but we want to have this water fountain more like an inclusive, close to the inclusive playground, because to avoid some kids that the noise, too many people, or other circumstances can affect that going to the splash pad. So the idea is to create this, and then this one had to follow ADA regulation. So the funds are going to be the fund for this project is going to be from the park's fee in lieu of land dedication from the Quarry Ridge Retirement Community. And then you have, I add to the amendment some picture, so you can see it, how do those water fountain look like for this type of park. They need to be accessible by wheelchair walkers, and they have to have an specification. I am in my rationale, some of the specification.
Very good. Additional discussion? Alder Strassman, are you raising your hand?
Yes.
Okay, you have the floor.
I was wondering, are our water fountains open now because of COVID? Or are they still closed? Because I know some of the parks, they still have the garbage bags over the top.
The one in my Kiefer Park, they're open because I have used it.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to know.
Any other additional questions, discussion? Hearing none, we will move on to the next amendment, which is amendment number 20. Delay stormwater pond dredging and retrofitting project CIP 4702. And Alder Gerhart, you're the sponsor. Would you like to speak to amendment number 20?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So these last 6 amendments, I think, yeah, these last 6 amendments are all related. I brought these forward as a strategy to potentially reduce the stormwater utility fees that are likely to go up this year with this budget, and also reduce the workload of the department, which we had a discussion right at the top about how overworked this department is. And there's a lot of projects in the CIP that are moving forward right now. So this list, the next 5 amendments are a list that my understanding is that our Public Works Director has identified these as the projects that have the potential to be pushed. Not that they should, I don't have a value judgment on this. I just think it needs to be discussed by us as a council. But these are the ones that have the possibility of being pushed. Now, I did clarify with our finance director that moving these projects does not mean that that utility rate will go down. But if we move these projects, I believe that we can eliminate the stormwater engineer position, which is the new stormwater engineer position, which is the last item. And if we eliminate that position, it'll make our, instead of the stormwater utility rates going up 7%, they'll go up about 3 or 4%. So that is but we cannot remove that position, I think, unless we move these projects. And at the same time, there's not enough staff capacity right now to do these projects as is. So I think we can go through these one by one and identify if you all think that this is, if there's a particular reason this project would not be able to be moved. I did note in the description which ones potentially can qualify for ARPA funding, because they've specified, from my understanding is that they've specified that stormwater projects in general don't qualify. It's stormwater projects that influence water quality are the ones. So not every single stormwater project is going to qualify for ARPA funding. But my understanding is that we can earmark projects for ARPA funding, some of these projects even next year, but they would wait until 2023 to get started because of the staffing issue. Misty, do you have anything to add to that? And I'd like to hear from Bill Balke too, if he has anything to add.
I don't have anything to add, unless there's questions for me.
No, given the list of programs and projects that have been moved up from, future years into next year, Claudia worked really hard to get all the RFPs ready to go out for next year. So we are ready to advertise and bid those come January 1. But it is an issue that we have to prioritize the projects that we want to try to get done. There are some that we absolutely have to get done. But these are ones that we can get done. It's just that which ones do you want to get done? Prioritization, I guess, with the hours that we have available. So if you want to move them back, that's fine. Otherwise, we can try to get them done and we can go from there.
I actually didn't realize that. So Bill, you're saying that it's all 5 of these amendments, the possibility for the projects that have the strong possibility of being able to be completed next year?
Yeah, they're mostly the design projects, except for the East Sherrill project or the Sherrill Drive project. That's the design and construction that we have currently ongoing. So otherwise, the design projects, it's overseeing the design contracts, public information meetings, things like that. But, you know, it's a number of projects that got moved up that, again, in that department, that area, we feel that it's, we just don't have the capacity to add more projects, but we'll try to get them done. And, you know, we need some assistance from the council to say, out of the 7 projects here, these are the top 5 we want to get done, or top 3, and we'll certainly concentrate on those, but understand that, you know, in the event that we run out of time or capacity to do that, that some of these other projects might slide into the next year.
One moment. All right. Anything further, Alder Gerhart?
No, if people have questions.
Yeah. No, I know there's questions. And since I'm chairing, I get to ask the first question. There's a level of frustration on my part. I continue to receive notification from the residents of Seminole Forest in particular, since I've been campaigning, about the ponds in Seminole Glen. And I've met with them multiple times. And I don't want to speak ill of the stormwater engineer because I have a good relationship with that particular person. And that person is not here to defend, but I know I've asked that person to join us on multiple occasions when I've met with the residents, and that person's always declined. For some reason, I just get the strong impression that Seminole Glen is just not on top of the list, and it never will be. You mentioned that, well, we can move it out, delay, but I've heard this for quite some time, and the residents keep telling me that as well. This has been out there forever. There are some issues there that I think need to be addressed. And anybody can walk through the park, and those ponds are overgrown. There's some real issues with the water that runs down into the kettle. There's some real issues with that sidewalk that was placed, and it's just one big dam. That ground was meant for the water to not necessarily percolate completely down in, but then to percolate down in and then move. But the sidewalk is there as a dam. I don't know, there really needs to be a study done, and there needs to be some movement on this particular park. Maybe I'm biased because I live there, but there is enough residents. And I can assure you, November 9th, there will be a number of people, just like there was in June and July, here to speak. So everybody here should expect a long evening, at least by that, just by this amendment alone. Now, you go back up to Curry Court. The residents out in Curry Court, they don't even want this to move forward. I have no problem of moving it out or even voting it down. And you know, we could go on and on. I mean, at one point, Dunn's Marsh, that's all I heard was, this is number 1, this is number 1, this is number 1. Now it's, you know, we shouldn't even do it. Those are my comments. I will open it up to the rest of the committee. I saw.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I trust that if there are certain projects, I mean, it sounds like the Seminole Glen is one that you prefer to be off the table. And it sounds like Bill said that the RFP is ready to go for January 1. So as far as I'm concerned, and that project is smaller on the scale of it's only 38,000. I mean, I'd be happy to rescind that amendment, just given the interest of the neighborhood. Yeah, and like, yeah, but, you know, delaying the flooding on Dunn's Marsh project, you know, that was my amendment to move it up. I just think they should all be discussed as a group, because I think we should consider the workload, but it sounds like maybe this isn't unnecessary given what Bill has indicated. Anyway, I'll let other people respond.
My concern is delay, and I hear delay, and they're all CIP projects. We all know how the CIP process works. Delay could mean to 2030. I mean, I don't know, and I don't plan to be here in 2030, so I won't be fighting that battle. Alder, well, maybe. Alder or Frada. Back to that.
So my question is, we are in number 20, okay? So this is reduce the stormwater budget to 200 at the and delays of the project. So I go into the CIP, because in my district, I have two issues with stormwater, okay? So if we delay this, there is a current upcoming project, okay? So my question to you, Bill, is if we delay the 2022, it means that we are delaying the one in 23 to 24, isn't it? We are delaying, and if we delay one, we need to delay all of them. The one that they come after, because my concern is, in 2023, we had a McKean Farm Southwest Pond. That we have to do it in 2023 because it's the Southwest Pond that is all affecting kind of the Sherrill Drive area too.
Correct.
So my concern is we are start delaying some of these projects in 2022. So the 2023, my key from Southwest Pond is going to be delayed maybe 24, 25, I don't know. So, and because this dredging is linked to a project that you are saying we need to fix next year, the Sherrill Drive, because these people have been waiting for 6 years to get this project fixed. I want to understand if we are start delaying one, it's going to be like a domino effect that everyone is going to go, delay.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at it from the perspective of us effective next week. I'm going to be the stormwater engineer as well, so I'll be the project manager for all of these projects through the end of March. And to manage all of those projects plus the DPW projects, and it's going to be a lot. And so I'm asking for assistance to, if I can shift some of these into later in the year, we can get them done, I think. It's just that I'm doing two jobs at once, so.
You may continue on that.
So
that conversation.
if you really need help, and because you are the expert, you as the council, I'm going to fight for my district, project, and Randy's going to fight for his district, So I think you should come up with a list in the next couple of weeks and say, hey, council, these are the one, because of your capacity, because, Claudia is on leave, these are the projects that I think they are taking priority for next year. And this one is the one that we need to maybe delay for a couple of months because we don't have the capacity, the staff, or whatever it is. But I think the list, you need to initiate a list and share with us. And then, because if you want us to do this list, all of us, we have conflict of interest. So we are going to be fighting each other for our project. So I think it should come from you guys, your team are the expert. You should come up with a list and say, this is the priority. And then we can discuss the list and maybe we should all compromise. You know what I mean? And say, okay, makes sense. You mentioned that there are some projects that you already are sending the RFP or whatever. So this one, they need to continue. But, the one that we are in phase 0, I think my recommendation, I will feel more confident that at least you initiate, provide us with that first list, we discuss it, but you are the expert, Bill. You are the one who are going to tell you, I think this is my number 1, this is my number 2, this one are the one that they can, I don't know.
Go ahead, Chad.
Bill, I know that you had provided a list, or Claudia had provided a list based upon the amendments with a priority. Would you like me to forward that to council?
Sure.
All right, I'll do that now.
Alder Herbst, you have a...
I just wanted to add one, I don't think we can delay the one, Sherrill Drive, it's tied in with a road project. Am I correct, Bill?
Correct.
So that one, that needs to stay, there. It's tied in with a road project. So that's all I wanted to add there.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. Bill, can you tell me which RFPs are ready to go, or is that ready to go out? Or is that something that, could you provide to council?
Yeah, we have several out right now, and some will be posted by the end of the week. So I think the only one that we don't have out right now is the stormwater dredging, but all the other projects have RFPs out, that if approved, we would start January 1 with the budget. So we're going through the vetting process. We'll, make sure that we have everything ready to go if everything's ready. But it's going to be a lot to manage right at the beginning of the year.
I'm going to ask a additional question. With an RFP, is there certain timelines when they're due back in? I'm assuming that's staggered throughout the year.
Yes, our RFPs are due. Some are due this week, some in mid-November, December. They are staggered as to when we're putting them out, but we do have them prepared and either out or ready to go out.
Alder Arata Frada, you have a question?
Yeah, my question was similar to your question, Randy, is about, because when you send the RFP, what happens, you have good bids, and then we say, no, we have capacity issue, we are going to rebid in 6 months. You know what I mean? So this is what, if we haven't sent them yet, maybe you need to determine which one are the one that you really will have capacity next year to work on this project, because you're going to send 6 RFP and you say, right now you're saying you are not going to have capacity to work on all these projects. So do we need to send all of those RFP, or we need to choose the one that we, you know what I mean? So we have to be smart in, now we are at time because you haven't sent it yet, some of them. So, I don't know.
Go ahead, Chad.
Bill, would it be safe to say that obviously the construction on any of these projects wouldn't happen until spring of next year, at which time the project and stormwater utility engineer would be back from leave?
Right. Most of these are design RFPs. One of them would be a construction RFP. And then there's another one that for the Sherrill Drive would be another construction later in the year. When we prepared our budget, we were looking at, okay, all of these projects got moved up to 2022, and we need to have the capacity to do the projects in 2022. So that we added the additional stormwater engineer in addition to all of the duties that go along with stormwater engineering. So we were kind of foreseeing that and preparing for that. So that's why we are preparing the RFPs now under the assumption that the staffing plan would go through. If it doesn't, I'm asking for some help to reprioritize these projects and what we can do in a given year.
Okay, and I fully understand the capacity issue and your needs. Just to go circle back around to the Seminole Glen. Now that is a study, and you put the RFP out, and it goes through its process. It comes back, and the study is just that. A study tells us what needs to be done, cared for. I would think at that point there would be help me. I don't know your department. There would be very little further involvement, because there's going to be another phase. I'm assuming the work itself, whatever comes from that study, and that will be another challenge that will come before the city council as, do we move forward with that work or do we delay that? I'm looking at the study itself, and what is that telling us? What needs to be done? I mean, I guess that's where I'm going. I'm just trying to get the study to move forward. So,
Yep, we can definitely get that going. There's a large public involvement portion of the project as well. So that takes up a lot of time, and then just organizing the meetings and things like that. So it's all the little administrative things that I'm going to have to try to find some help with that. But
sure,
I think we can get those done.
Bill, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Bill. So I don't know if the other alders have had a chance to pull up the email that Chad sent out with the list of projects and the delays, but it sounds like, based on what I'm looking at here, this first amendment that we're looking at, number 20, delay stormwater pond dredging and retrofitting, which is a $200,000 project. It says it's not time sensitive, can be combined with multiple future year projects. So that sounds like a candidate for potentially delaying.
Which pond is that? Where is that? Can you, without me looking it up further? No,
Yeah, in the CIP, there's the CIP project is attached to the amendment. And it's a list of current and upcoming.
Okay.
Filtration repair, that one?
I'm sorry, it's the what?
It's called Tech Lands Infiltration Repairs Project.
What's the location?
The location is at Nobel and Micah, near the apartments.
Your district, Randy.
My district coming, yeah. You want me to put that on my list?
I tell you, it's gonna be a war.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Is there additional discussion? So since we've kind of addressed 20 through 24, is it fair that, do I need to make it official, each amendment, Misty? I'm looking for.
I guess it's ultimately up to this body. You could ask if there's anything else on all of that group.
Is there anything within the group? Is everybody?
I want to know what is the next step with this. You know, how we are going to proceed from here to November, the night that we need to vote. I want to be sure what is the plan.
That's kind of what I was hoping too, is just like getting a sense of what, if us as a group wants to delay any of these projects, and kind of figuring out what we'd like to do, and if there's any I should bring off the table on November 9th, just to be for efficiency's sake. It sounds to me like right now that the alders are indicating that they don't want any of these projects moved, which is fine. We can make that choice. But I just, you know, and I can rescind them if we're going to fail all of them anyway. I don't think there's any reason we need to spend time on this on November 9th. But I was just hoping we could talk about it comprehensively. But it sounds to me like the alders, or if any other alders that haven't spoken want to weigh in, I was hoping we'd have more of a discussion about which projects we could choose to delay.
Go ahead, Alder Rutherford.
Okay, thank you, Randy. My concern, Gabriela, is I want to know if we can delay this. If Bill can tell us, yes, some of them you can delay, because you know what? Even if you pass, I am not going to have the time to do it. You know what I mean? I don't have capacity, and they're going to be, you know, we are going to approve this project, but we are not going to do it. So, you know, I want to know, because then we don't, and decided which one are the one that, yes, they are a smaller project, I think we have capacity, we can do it, and we avoid on November night to have people here to come and complain about why my stormwater project is not, you know, discussed. So I think we need to be strategically as a council and think if we agree in some or compromise on which are the ones that we think they have a chance to be moved forward, and what are the one that Bill doesn't have the capacity at all. I don't know. We'll see.
Go ahead, Chad.
And I think, you know, once we're through the budget process, Bill and his team might be able to help with that conversation. I know that doesn't help with the amendments, but I think there are a couple of amendments that obviously directly reflect the capacity, or more specifically, the increase potential in capacity for the engineering department. And, you know, depending upon what this body decides to do in regards to those amendments with the additional staffing that's been proposed by the mayor in his budget for the Public Works Department, is probably going to impact, you know, what Bill would ultimately be able to decide on these particular priorities as it relates to those projects. Is that safe for me to say, Bill, or?
That's safe. Thank you.
I'm going to just follow up on two questions on that. As far as I keep hearing the word delay. I mean, delay is delay in the year of 2022, or is it, will that be defined and in the sense of, we're going to move it to 2023? Because to me, if it's in 2022, this body is authorizing it for 2022 and with federal, or with dollars for 2022. Now, if it's pushed out to 2023, or let's say it's pushed out later in the year, part of it's $2022, part of it's $2023. I don't know. Misty, do you understand the question that I'm driving at or asking?
I think so. So ultimately, right now, what we're looking at is just 2022. When we do the CIP, it's that longer range document, but right now, we're really narrow focus on just 2022. So let's say you do something here and you delay it. Then when I put together the new CIP, I will just delay it 1 year, absent other direction from council through this amendment process. But then it would go through that CIP process again. So that's where you could decide if 2023 is the correct year, or if it should be something delayed even more than that.
Yeah,
but
you're answering it with a question, or with the answer I don't care to hear. I mean, in the sense of, I feel like I'm starting it all over again, and it's been very painful up to this point for what the residents of District 4 or Lake Seminole Forest want. And, you know, I really don't want to start that part of the process over. But anyway. Yes, go ahead.
Some of them, they have a priority. So, and some of them, they have a priority 3 that we are already, Gabriela is already delaying with some of her amendments. But I think the one if you look at this, the one that in yellow, highlighted in yellow are the one with amendments. And that one have priority 3 and 2. So we are not touching the priority 1.
Chad, do you want to email that document to me and I'll put it up on the screen? Or if you're in Zoom?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is that we can make this decision by delaying one of these projects that's proposed, or one or more of the projects that's proposed. But if we don't make a decision on any of them, if we leave them in the budget, realistically, some of those will be delayed by default because the department won't have time to work on all of them. So either we decide, or it just will happen anyway by lack of staff time. Is that right? That's kind of what I'm hearing from the department head?
I think that's correct, Gabriela. Are you sharing, or you did and you brought it down? Okay. Oh. Yeah. Alder Wheeler, go ahead.
So is the plan to make some type of decision tonight? Because I'm just looking at Curry Court and all the things that went into that process right now. And I just don't have enough information, not to say that I wouldn't delay it or anything, but I just need more time to actually think about it.
Right. Well, Curry Court in and of itself is difficult in what the residents want and what direction city has out at this point, so. Alder Herbst, you had a question?
What's the highest? Three or 1?
1 would be the highest priority.
Okay.
No.
And so as far as process goes, so tonight is the discussion night. So if we think that there's going to be a bigger prioritization conversation, that would be great to have that tonight. Because once we get to November 9th, you won't have the opportunity to have that more thorough discussion. However, it sounds like maybe there's not quite enough time to digest what your priorities are. So I don't know that this is actually a great meeting to have that full conversation. So it might need to wait until the next one, but just remember when it comes to November 9th, it's gonna have to be very succinct about yes or no. And I'll mention too, I specifically ordered the amendments this way so that it's all of those capital projects first, so you guys could decide on that. In theory, if none of those pass and all of the projects are moving forward as is, the last amendment is the staffing that would provide that capacity.
I said, which of those would American Recovery Act funding? You know, if I'm looking at this, it would be a pond retrofit, you know, from a dry bottom to a wet bottom, or you know, the Seminole Glen, I think, would certainly classify as a water quality. I'm not sure if any of the other ones do.
Misty, can you?
Yes, I'm going to actually stop
shed some
that
light.
share and put up a different file because that had that list on it. So ARPA funding, as far as I understand right now, again, interim rules, don't know final. There's still a lot of uncertainty. But what I understand right now is that only stormwater quality projects can be used, not stormwater quantity projects. So in that same list, but without the yellow highlighting, Bill had identified which ones were quality.
Hang on. 'Cause no, not Misty, Julia. So we have a couple other questions up there, and I'll add them to the list. I'll let them go first, so. Yeah, I wasn't sure if Misty.
Yep, so the
finished?
last column here then is the stormwater quality component. If it's a yes, then it would potentially be funded by ARPA funding. On Bill's behalf, I'd like to remind you, though, that even if it gets funded from a different project, the staff capacity is still needed to do that project. So even if ARPA can be used for it, it doesn't necessarily save that. And I'll also mention that ARPA funding has to be expended, or I guess incurred or earmarked or have contracts signed by the end of 2024. So we have time there too. We don't have to actually spend the money till the end of 2026. So the ones that are stormwater quality component could be funded that way at some point in the next few years if we still wanted to space that out to give staff some extra capacity or some phased out.
All right, and with that, Mayor Richardson, do you have a question? And then we'll go to Alder Allen.
Yeah, I guess just one comment. I understand, and I get this is challenging and this is hard to do right now, you know, kind of under the gun. All these projects are important. They do need to be done at some point in time, and capacity is a concern. I think that when I look at the list, you know, Curry Court, they actually might not want that anymore, knowing that they would have to pay some money towards that. But most of these, I think, want to be done. When I look at the list, though, I think that the Seminole Glen and Cheryl Parkway, or Cheryl Parkway are going to be the two that have the most interest and the most people that are going to come out and say, wait a minute, how could you even consider postponing this? Because we've heard from those people a lot before, and it's an issue that they've been dealing with for a number of years. And I don't know, I want to say that we should make a decision, you know, do anything or make any statement now to avoid lots of people coming in, because people should absolutely come in and express their opinion. But I think that we could easily have an hour of people saying, how dare you postpone Shallow Drive? How dare you post Seminole Glen? And if that's something where we can even say now, like, hey, those two we're going to keep on the list. And the priority is based on a lot of different things. But I mean, those are two that I know people are passionate about. I know they're going to be here if it's possible that it's going to be cut, even though with staff capacity, I don't know if those are necessarily possible anyway. Along with everything else on there, I don't know if it's possible to say, you know, tonight, those ones that we know are huge and important, and how do you balance that versus other projects? Because all those projects are important, and they're important for different reasons, and they're important to the people who are impacted. We've seen those two, especially with a lot of input.
Can I just clarify that not all the amendments on this list we're looking at are to have amendments associated with them? So I just want to clarify that list of projects was everything, and I only submit amendments for ones that could have been delayed. So just for clarification.
All right. Alder Allen, you have the floor.
Well, just as a, first of all, a brief comment, Curry Court and the water issues down there have been going on for at least 2 decades. So yeah, there may be some cost to the residents for it, but I'm not sure that that's going to necessarily back off most of the people down there, and it's still an issue that's going to have to be dealt with at some point. But what the comment that I really wanted to make is, you know, there's a lot of information that's been presented tonight, and there's some questions that don't have answers. And I think Misty's right that waiting until the council meeting on, what is it, the 16th or the 12th, whatever day it is, I think it's going to be difficult to have that kind of discussion then. But I do want to point out that we do have a posted meeting for next Tuesday, and you know, it would give us a little time to go back and talk to our residents, and maybe just, you know, after we talk about the redistricting thing, we can spend just a little bit of time. I'm not talking about whatever it is now, a 4-hour meeting, but just a little bit of time talking about the priorities when we've had a little more information from the department heads and had a little bit of time to talk to residents about what they think.
Alder Rada, you had a question earlier regarding quality, quantity?
Yes, one is what is the difference between quantity and quality? I want to understand that. And the other, I was thinking the same that Jay's, we have a meeting next week. So maybe we can use part of the meeting to finalize some of the discussion here. I don't know, with more information. That's it.
Yeah, essentially for a project to qualify as a water quality project, we're taking, you know, dirty storm water, routing it through a wet pond or a filtration system that would clean the water up. So anything that's associated with cleaning the water up before it enters our streams and rivers is a water quality project. The water quantity is we're digging a basin, we're making a dam, we're doing something to protect downstream bodies from flooding. That would be just a quantity project. So that's how those projects were ranked on that table.
Well, is there, I'm under the impression that we will leave the amendments 20 through 24 on the list and well, do some more thinking on the capacity issue, but at the same time, we will work through them on November 9th. Alder Herbst.
I'm just going to offer, I'm going to throw this out, you know, being on the Board of Public Works, I'm going to throw out a priority to the alders to take a look at, you know, based on, and you know, I'll try to send that out tomorrow. I'll send that out tomorrow, or I'll send it to Bill first, make sure he doesn't want to break my neck, and then I'll send it out. I got it. You know, some of this is path of least resistance. You know, I not that I always want to do what's needed, but Seminole Glen, you know, I might not make it out of this building, you know, if we don't do the study on that. But let me take a shot at giving you what I would perceive the priority, and you know, after Bill looks at it, then I'll send it to all the alders.
Thank you for that. Alder Gerhardt, since, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mayor Richardson?
I just want to caution the perception of meeting stuff happening on email, not in the open meetings and the violent open meetings laws. I think that's great if you send your perspective, but we cannot discuss it on email outside of an open meeting. And so I just want to remind people of that. In fact, it's even better if you want to send it to Bill, maybe, and have Bill forward it to everyone. that helps if it comes from staff instead of a council member. But just a reminder, we cannot discuss it outside of an open meeting. So just kind of that warning, and want to make sure that anyone watching doesn't think that that's going to happen. All of a sudden we show up on the 9th, I think it is, and we just, oh, we already know what's going on and here's what happens. That's not going to happen. We can't do that. In terms of doing something, adding that on the 2nd, I think that's a possibility. Actually, Valerie today asked myself and Chad if she can also give an update on the Hy-Vee lawsuit that night as well, which I don't think will take long, but we'll have to go in this closed session for just a short period so she can give us an update on that lawsuit. We promised it was only going to be redistricting, and if it turns into a 2-3 hour meeting, I don't know if people, when they said they were available at 5:30, if that meant they can be available at 5:30 to 8:30. Hopefully they can. I agree. It seems like we do need more discussion before the 9th, and so we can do that. Hopefully that works for people.
Thank you, Aaron. Good suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out that issue. Alder Gerhardt, does that answer your?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, very good. All right. With that, moving on then to amendment number 2025, remove part-time stormwater project engineer position. And Alder Gerhardt, you are the sponsor. Would you like to address amendment number 25?
Yeah, I'll talk about it quickly. If we do remove this position, this is what would cause a reduction in the utility rate that is going to go up. And this is the only thing that we would delay that would cause the utility rate to go down, to my knowledge, based on what I've learned from Misty. So, but on that being said, I do not want to remove this if we don't delay the majority of these projects. So I feel like this is very much tied. So Misty's ordering was just right, because if we don't delay some of these projects, we really have to have that extra position. So this is tied to the other ones, and that's my intent, is that it's a last final decision to see if we can avoid a utility rate increase, but it's dependent on what comes before it.
Yeah, Alder Rutherford, go ahead.
So my question is to Bill. So this position is not only because there are future projects coming in the pipeline, it's because you have a bottleneck right now. You need help, capacity issue, isn't it?
Correct. There's some duties that we're delaying, and you're seeing some service decreases as well to the public, just because we can't get to everything. And like I said, when we tried to space the projects out in the CIP so that we could balance our workload, and it's tough when everything gets crunched together. So just to understand that there are parts of our CIP or parts of our stormwater program that we are seeking improvement on, that are required by our permits. So we really wanted to focus on that and make sure that we're doing that, as well as the future planning. Because of our climate change, we're dealing more and more with the stormwater floods and the stormwater quality that's coming in, the environmental concerns. So it's growing, as well as the growing city. It's just, there's more to take care of now.
No, I agree with this position. That one, it was included as a part-time, yes, not as a full-time. I don't have problem in supporting this position, like, delaying the assistant public work director, you know what I mean? But it would be great if this position can be funded at full time too, you know what I mean? But
Okay. Additional questions, discussion? Right, hearing none, and that concludes the amendments, with the exception of Alder Wheeler would like to revisit Amendment 12. He has a brief question.
Yeah, just a little bit of clarification. The Madison Fire Department, their lieutenants are not in the union. Would that have any effect here? It was the, I think Aaron brought up, that there's some issues about the union status.
The Madison Fire Department, their lieutenants are in the union. They are part of the collective bargaining agreement, and that they provide frontline supervision.
So I take it that would have to be something that's added to a contract? That would be a contract issue?
Our lieutenants, our career lieutenants are already in the union, so it's not a position that we're creating. We're promoting 3 people into an existing job classification.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Okay, very good. Back to the next item on the agenda, Omnibus Amendment Number A, update debt service amounts based on actual 2021 issuance. Misty, are you addressing?
Yes, please.
You have the floor.
So there are 4 omnibus amendments, which are really just kind of correction amendments. The first one is debt service. So for the 2021 issuance. So you guys have authorized us to borrow the $15 million in order to fund some capital projects. We will sell those bonds the same day that we are passing the budget. So there will probably be some changes needed to the budget based on those actual sale results, and wanted to make that correction in the budget just so everything ties out.
Okay. Would you like me to move on to the next one, or are you?
Unless there's questions.
Yes. Is there any questions, discussion?
So my question is of the interest rate?
So the interest rate, yes, and then as well as if we get premium, which would help pay for that first couple of interest payments. So there's a couple of things that are still outstanding.
Okay, further discussion. Moving on to Omnibus Amendment Number B, adjust for refuse and recycling rate approved by resolution, if different. Misty.
So last night, council approved a different refuse rate than what was included in the mayor's budget. So this one will need to get updated and then approved so that we can correct the 2022 revenue budget.
Discussion. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next. Omnibus Amendment Number C, adjust for transfer out of fund balance, ERP strategy. Misty.
So there's still a lot of uncertainty about the expenditure restraint program and what adjustment the state will allow me to take because of the town of Madison. So Omnibus Amendment C and D are kind of the opposite strategies. So if the Department of Revenue lets me take more of an adjustment than what we technically need to meet the program, this Omnibus Amendment C will be a transfer basically from the general fund to the capital projects fund. Think of it like transferring from checking to savings. No additional taxes levied, it's just a transfer, but that would allow us to retain that capacity for future years with the expenditure restraint program. We've used this strategy the last few years now, and is a good way to save that. The opposite side of that coin, if the Department of Revenue does not allow me to take as much of an adjustment as what we need to still qualify for the expenditure restraint budget, then there's a thing that I've been wanting to do, but I don't want to do it if it blows expenditure restraint. So if we are going to anyways, then this would be the year to move Fact TV from a separate special revenue fund into the general fund. Up until last year, or I guess this year, Fact TV was funded solely by franchise fees and other revenues, not at all by property taxes. That has changed now with 2021 and 2022. So they've really just kind of become a department of the general fund, not changing any of the things that are budgeted, not changing their funding source at all. It's really just an accounting change so that they're moved into the general fund. So if we are not going to qualify for expenditure restraint, I want to put that in there because it needs to happen at some point. And so we might as well do that big shift in a year where it won't hurt our expenditure restraint program. So those are kind of the two opposites. I'm hopeful that I'll have some resolution with the Department of Revenue before we vote on the 9th. But if I don't have that, I'm hopeful that the council will give me some flexibility there to implement whichever of those strategies I need to implement to meet the intentions of what those amendments would be.
Okay, so that's C and D combined in one. Is there discussion? I see Alder Allen's hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Jay.
are you saying that Fact TV is no longer completely funded by the franchise fees?
As of 2021, I believe it was just shy of $100,000 of property taxes that were used, and now it's 150,000-ish.
So your thought then is just the franchise fees go into the general fund, in fact, is basically put on the regular operating budget.
Exactly. So just consolidating it with everything else. It really is just kind of an accounting change. No real change to their budget.
I didn't realize that the franchise fees no longer covered operations.
Okay. Additional discussion. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, Resolution R-206-21, adopting special rules for 2022 budget adoption. Discussion only. No action will be taken. So I will turn this back over to Misty.
Yes, so similar to the last couple of years, levy limits is going to be our concern. And I assume at the end of the night, we all want to pass a budget that works and that meets levy limits, and that we don't have to come back to another meeting to adjust what was already approved. So in the ordinances are kind of the traditional budget adoption processes, and that's what I've got shared up on the screen right now. So these are those limits that we've been talking about. So we'll vote on each one of the amendments individually. Generally, it's the person who sponsored it that moves approval, and then somebody will second it. You will have very limited discussion on each amendment, and then we'll vote. So that limited discussion, it's limited to 5 minutes total for the amendment, including amendments to the amendment, unless the council as a body passes a 10-minute extension. And then as we are discussing it, each alderperson is only allowed to speak twice per amendment. And that includes amendments to the amendment. So if you have an amendment that you want to make changes to, even as you're talking about all those different changes, you can only speak twice total per amendment. So it's a very limited conversation that we'll be having that night. And that was intentional, so that this meeting is where we have the discussion. So when we get to council, we can just go real quickly through and at the end have something that passes. The concern I have, though, is that we might not have something that works at the end of that. So also that night, actually before we get into the amendments, is a separate resolution adopting special procedures. That's what's in front or on the screen now, and it's included as the supporting document for that separate resolution. What this says is that ultimately we'll go through that traditional process that's outlined in the ordinances. At the end of that, we'll take a recess where the city clerk and I will compare notes, see whether or not we pass. And then we go into this kind of unique special process, which is this step 4, which will allow council to reconsider any of the amendments that have already been voted on and discussed. So we won't go each one. It can be whichever ones you choose to maybe reconsider or vote differently. There's still limits on it, so it's a total of 5 minutes still, but each person can only speak once per amendment. Theory being, you already did that once. Now if we have to reconsider something, it really should be quick changes. We'll go through that opportunity once. Again, only the amendments that you choose to reconsider, not every single one. We'll take another brief recess where the clerk and I will compare notes, see if it works. If not, we'll have that reconsideration process again. Last year, I was surprised you guys got it done in one set. We never had to do any reconsiderations. So hopefully we can do that again this year. But if not, we wanted to have that process available. And I'd like having this approved via resolution before we get into that, so that everybody knows what the playing rules are, or what the game rules are for what the process will be going forward. So,
Can I just make one comment on that? I think I see that working like we do with consent agenda, where we say, okay, which ones of these amendments do you want to reconsider? We get the list, and then we'll go through those again in order like we did, just because I think we talked about this last year even, is that in theory, you could just say, oh, whoever I see first, we'll do that one. And maybe we change something and the whole thing balances and we just be done. But this way we figure out, okay, these are the 3 or 4 or whatever, how many it's going to be. We'll go through all of those and then recalculate. Because I think my first year on council, maybe it was kind of like, oh, we're balanced after this one, we're done. And it's like, wait a minute, I want to talk about these two as well. And it was too late. So I think that's where I kind of see that in almost like a consent agenda where, okay, which ones do people want to reconsider? All right, these are the 4. Let's go through all of them and then see where we are again at the end of that.
And I assume go in amendment number order, not necessarily
Yeah.
when they were suggested.
Yeah, in amendment order again.
Excellent. So I realize this process is not ideal. It'd be much easier if we didn't have to do the reconsideration, but think that it is important that we try to get it all done in one night, so we all have something at the end. Then after we do that, there is more to the process. There is a closing statements opportunity. So each person will be allowed to give basically their overall view of what they think the budget is total. It is a total of 5 minutes, not 3, but there is a limit at least. And then once that's done, we will adopt the resolution. And then there is a veto process where the mayor could potentially veto things out of the budget, then an override process. Let's just hope we don't have to go there, but there is that laid out in the ordinances as well.
This that you have on the screen, is it the ordinance? Is it a city ordinance?
So this on the screen is not. This is my proposed changed resolutions. The ones with the stars are kind of those extra steps.
Right.
But the second page in this document is the ordinances.
And if I remember correctly, last year this was attached to the packet, or at least it was provided somewhere. Will you provide that again?
Yep, it should be attached to the resolution. So there's a separate resolution for this that was referred out last night. Was it not? I will email it out right now
Okay.
and make sure it's included in the future.
Can we make change to that?
So council can, not tonight because there's no voting, but on the 9th, yes. Council could choose to make changes to the process.
Okay.
Are you emailing that to all of us?
Yep, I will email it to all of you. I will also make sure it's in the packet for the 9th.
Yes.
I'm not sure what happened. Yep.
Okay, fine. Yes, Alder Gerhart, thank you. You have the
I just
floor.
want to, thank you. I just want to clarify that this is the same as last year, right? Are there any changes from these rules from last year? Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I think I'm kind of
Yes,
breaking up.
we can hear you.
Oh.
Yep.
Could you hear me? Maybe not.
No, I didn't hear. Sorry. I didn't hear at all.
Yes, so this is this exact same proposal as what I recommended last year.
Right. And then my second question is for reconsideration step. Are the amendments, are the only amendments on the table the ones that affect the tax levy? Or do we revisit, because there's some of them that are stormwater only, that are just rates, they're not for tax levy. Is that limited to tax levy amendments?
Ultimately, that's a council decision. My intention would be that you would do it to all of them, but I guess that's a nuance I hadn't considered.
Because ultimately it's about meeting levy limits, right?
Right.
Is that something we would discuss that evening then?
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so
Yep.
we're not voting this evening, there's no action, so, okay, all right.
Correct.
Can you repeat that, Gabriela?
Yeah, all I'm saying is that for the reconsideration, the reason we're reconsidering is to meet levy limits. So therefore, I think we should limit it to the amendments that affect the levy. Because there are several amendments that either don't affect the levy or only affect
okay.
stormwater
Yeah.
rates.
Right.
And so I don't think those should be on the table for reconsideration.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, hopefully none of them are like controversial, but it'd be nice not to revisit things that don't actually affect the levy limit as a rule of thumb
Yeah,
for that process.
I'm in agreement as well. Alder Wheeler, you had a question? Nope, okay. Further discussion?
I actually have a question. Is
Yeah.
this body open to me redlining these based on the discussion we're having tonight and including that redlined version in the packet for the 9th? So that we at least have wording that you could approve if that's what you're thinking?
What do you mean?
So about the amendments only that are affected by levy, I can add that to the procedure as the redlined. And then the comment that Aaron had about getting the accumulated list of the ones that we'll reconsider prior to actually voting. So I can change the document, the proposed process based on those two suggestions using track changes so you can see what they are.
Yes, please.
And then you guys can vote clearer, hopefully, on the 9th.
I think that's a great suggestion. I don't see anybody objecting. If so, please speak up.
I I will do that then.
Okay. With that, is there further comments, Misty, or?
Nope, that is it. That's all I have.
Okay, all right. Moving on to announcements. The next committee of the whole meeting is scheduled for January 26, 2022. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Moved by Alder Arata Frada, second by Alder Gerhart. Discussion.
Strassman.
Oh, that was Strassman. I'm sorry. Correction. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor of adjournment, please signify by say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We are officially adjourned at 9:45 p.m. All right. Thank you.